Доброго времени. Доброго времени суток всем.
Good morning, everybody.
Всем участникам международного марафона.
All of our participants of our international online marathon for the benefit of the whole world.
Погружаться в священное писание Srimad Bhagavatam.
We're going to continue to become absorbed in hearing the wonderful Srimad Bhagavatam.
Сосредоточиться на чем-то очень важном.
We're going to try to focus on something very important,
Будто бы как экстремально важно.
something that's extremely important.
Человек, который болеет или, например,
A person's sick
к примеру, да,
or is drowning
опаздывает на самолет.
or is late for an airplane, for example. Something very important for a person.
Человека захватывает его сознание.
Something's completely taken over his consciousness.
И, например, сейчас все ухватываются как за соломинку, за жизнь, за свою.
It's like a straw in our life,
ну, скажем, коронавируса, к примеру.
trying to keep ourselves safe from coronavirus.
Чтобы со мной это не случилось.
Everybody thinks that won't happen to me.
Сознание большинства планеты, оно сейчас охвачено этой пандемией, просто паники.
There's a pandemic, everyone's in panic.
То, что касается
Something's
существования.
very important, something that is important to my existence.
Такая, потому что если разбираться, что мы не материальное тело,
Illusion is that's just how it works. But if we think that we're not this body,
безусловно, мы должны беречь,
then we will absolutely take care of our body, because our body, we have the soul. We take care of the body, we take care of life. We need to take care of life so that we can develop our God consciousness, our Krishna consciousness, Narayana consciousness, Vishnu consciousness. This is why we need to do this. But most people don't worry about that. They're worried about their own lives. Their hope is being destroyed because their hope is connected with sense gratification for this body. And under threat of this hope, of this plan, this is called illusion, that which is not. And we're concentrating our consciousness on Bhagavatam because that isn't illusion, this is reality. When we're reading Bhagavatam or hearing Bhagavatam or talking about Bhagavatam or looking at Bhagavatam, we are spiritually progressing at that time. Our life isn't continuing in vain, going by in vain. Every day the sun goes up and goes down, our life is getting shorter. And in that moment when we're listening, studying Bhagavatam, then our life is going correctly. Our life is going spiritually. If we're studying, everything will happen is happening like a dream. If we're not making spiritual things in the middle of our life, so therefore we need to study Srimad Bhagavatam. We need to communicate with God. It's very important for our participants to think about this. Don't stress yourself out so that you can correctly use this time, so it becomes more practical time. This is the fundamentals of the spiritual life. This is the key to liberation from suffering. This is the key to achieving the highest perfection. It's the key to opening our original natures. We can see where this dynamic will take us if we're acting on the foundations of Srimad Bhagavatam. Everywhere it's glorifying the absolute truth, the highest absolute truth. There's holy people, saints. They're saying the same thing from different points of view. Srimad Bhagavatam is like a candy. It's very sweet wherever you open up. And the pastimes of God and his pastimes with his devotees, his associates, is very sweet. And therefore we need specific qualities. So when we come into contact with the devotees who are in Srimad Bhagavatam, we come in contact with those qualities. It maybe seems that we're doing something above this and not connected with it, but we're actually connected with all these qualities when we were reading Bhagavatam. Therefore, let's dive into it, starting our reading online marathon for the benefit of the whole world. There's some mantra we will chant. Will Bhavi Sarinha Sukhanaha Savibanahu Sukhinaha. I wish everybody happiness and be out of suffering. Sarvet means every, Sarveshanta means from Shanti, peacefulness. Sarve Shantu Niramayaha Sarve Bhavani Tashantu Ma. I forgot one line. But the meaning is this: let everyone be happy. Let everyone will be peaceful and calm. Well, peace rule in the minds of everyone. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayana Namaskrityam Naram Chiva Narottamam Devim Saraswati Vyasam Tato Jaya Mudirayet. Nashta Prayeshva Bhadrishu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki.
Srimad Bhagavatam, 4-я песня.
Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 22, verse 48. The great sage Maitreya continued, being thus worshipped by Maharaj Prithu, the 4 Kumaras, who were masters of devotional service, became very pleased. Indeed, they appeared in the sky and praised the character of the king, and everyone observed them. Amongst great personalities, Maharaj Prithu was the chief by virtue of his fixed position in relation to the spiritual enlightenment. He remains satisfied as one who has achieved all success in spiritual understanding. Being self-satisfied, Maharaj Prithu executed his duties as perfectly as possible according to the time and his situation, strength, and financial position. His only aim in all his activities was to satisfy the absolute truth in this way. He duly acted. Maharaj Prithu completely dedicated himself to be an eternal servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, transcendental to material nature. Consequently, all the fruits of his activities were dedicated to the Lord, and he always thought of himself as a servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the proprietor of everything. Maharaj Prithu, who was very opulent due to the prosperity of his entire empire, remained at home as a householder. Since he was never inclined to utilize his opulence for gratification of his senses, he remained unattached, exactly like a son, which is unaffected in all circumstances. Being situated in the liberated position of devotional service, Prithu Maharaj not only performed all fruitive activities, but also begot 5 sons by his wife, Archi. Indeed, all his sons were begotten according to his own desire. After beginning 5 sons named Vijitasva, Dhumaraksha, Haraksha, Dravina, and Vrika, Prithu Maharaj continued to rule the planet. He accepted all the qualities of the deities who governed all other planets. Since Maharaj Prithu was a perfect devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he wanted to protect the Lord's creation by pleasing the various citizens according to their various desires. Therefore, Prithu Maharaj used to please them in all respects by his words, mentality, works, and gentle behavior. Maharaj Prithu became as celebrated a king as Somaraj, the king of the moon. He was also powerful and exacting, just like the sun god, who distributes heat and light at the same time exacts all the planetary waters. Maharaj Prithu was so strong and powerful that no one could disobey his orders, and more than one could conquer fire itself. He was so strong that he was compared to Indra, the king of heaven, whose power is insuperable. On the other hand, Maharaj Prithu was also as tolerant as the earth, and in fulfilling various desires of human society, he was like heaven itself. Just as rainfall satisfies everyone's desires, Maharaj Prithu used to satisfy everyone. He was like the sea in that no one can understand his depths, and he was like Meru, the king of hills, in the fixity of his purpose. Maharaj Prithu's intelligence and education were exactly like that of Yamaraj, the superintendent of death. His opulence was comparable to the Himalaya mountains, where all valuable jewels and metals are stocked. He possessed great riches like Kuvera, the treasurer of the heavenly planets, and no one could reveal his secrets, for they were like the demigod Varunas. In his bodily strength, and in the strength of his senses, Maharaj Prithu was as strong as the wind, which can go anywhere and everywhere. As far as his intolerance was concerned, he was just like the all-powerful Rudra expansion of Lord Shiva, or Sada Shiva. In his bodily beauty, he was just like Cupid, and in his thoughtfulness, he was like a lion. In his affection, he was just like Swayambhuva Manu, and in his ability to control, he was like Lord Brahma. In his personal behavior, Prithu Maharaj exhibited all good qualities, and in spiritual knowledge, he was exactly like Brihaspati. In self-control, he was like the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. As far as his devotional service was concerned, he was a great follower of devotees who were attached to cow protection and the rendering of all service to the spiritual master and the brahmanas. He was perfect in his shyness and in his gentle behavior, and when he engaged in some philanthropic activity, he worked as if he were working for his own personal self. Throughout the whole universe, in the higher, lower, and middle planetary systems, Prithu Maharaj's reputation was loudly declared, and all the ladies and saintly persons heard his glories, which were as sweet as the glories of Lord Ramachandra. Thus end chapter 22 of Canto 4, Prithu Maharaj's meeting with the 4 Kumaras. Chapter 23. Maharaj Prithu's going back home. At the last stage of his life, when Maharaj Prithu saw himself getting old, that great soul, who was king of the world, divided whatever opulence he had accumulated amongst all kinds of living entities, moving and non-moving. He arranged pensions for everyone according to religious principles, and after executing the orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in complete coordination with him, he dedicated his sons onto the earth, which was considered to be his daughter. Then Maharaj Prithu left the presence of his citizens, who were almost lamenting and crying from feeling of separation from the king, and went to the forest alone with his wife to perform austerities. After retiring from family life, Maharaj Prithu strictly followed the regulations of retired life and underwent severe austerities in the forest. He engaged in these activities as seriously as he had formerly engaged in leading the government and conquering everyone. In the Tapovana, Maharaj Prithu sometimes ate the trunks and the roots of trees, and sometimes he ate fruit and dried leaves, and for some weeks he drank only water. Finally, he lived simply by breathing air. Following the principles of forest living and the footsteps of the great sages and munis, Prithu Maharaj accepted 5 kinds of heating processes during the summer season, exposed himself to torrents of rain in the rainy season, and in the winter stood in water up to his neck. He also used to simply lie down on the floor to sleep. Maharaj Prithu underwent all these severe austerities in order to control his words and senses, to refrain from discharging his semen, and to control the life air within his body. All this he did for the satisfaction of Krishna. He had no other purpose. By thus practicing severe austerities, Maharaj Prithu gradually became steadfast in spiritual life and completely free from all desire for fruitive activities. He also practiced breathing exercises to control his mind and senses, and by such control he became completely free from all desires for fruitive activity. Thus, the best among human beings, Maharaj Prithu followed that path of spiritual advancement which was advised by Sanat Kumara. That is to say, he worshipped the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Maharaj Prithu thus engaged completely in devotional service, executing the rules and regulations strictly according to principles 24 hours daily. Thus his love and devotion unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, developed and became unflinching and fixed. By regularly discharging devotional service, Prithu Maharaj became transcendental in his mind and could therefore constantly think of the lotus feet of the Lord. Because of this, he became completely detached and attained perfect knowledge by which he could transcend all doubt. Thus he was freed from the clutches of false ego and the material conception of life. When he became completely free from the conceptions of bodily life, Maharaj Prithu realized Krishna sitting in everyone's heart as the Parama Atma. Being thus able to get all instructions from him, he gave up all other practices of yoga and jnana. He was not even interested in the perfection of yoga and jnana systems, for he thoughtfully realized that that devotional service to Krishna is the ultimate goal of life, and that unless the yogis and jnanis become attached to Krishna Katha, narrations about Krishna, their illusions concerning existence can never be dispelled. In due course of time, when Prithu Maharaj was to give up his body, he fixed his mind firmly upon the lotus feet of Krishna, and thus, completely situated on the Brahma Bhuta platform, he gave up the material body. When Maharaj Prithu practiced a particular yogic sitting posture, he blocked the doors of his anus with his ankles, pressed his right and left calves, and gradually raised his air upward, passing it on to the circle of his navel, up to his heart and throat, and finally pushed it upward to the central position between his two eyes. In this way, Prithu Maharaj gradually raised his air of life up to the hole in his skull, whereupon he lost all desire for material existence. Gradually, he merged his air of life with the totality of air, his body with the totality of earth, and the fire within his body with the totality of fire. In this way, according to the different positions of the various parts of the body, Prithu Maharaj merged the holes of his senses with the sky, his bodily liquids, such as blood and various secretions, with the totality of water, and he merged earth with water, then water with fire, fire with air, air with sky, and so on. He amalgamated the mind with the senses, and the senses with the sense objects, according to their respective positions, and he also amalgamated the material ego with the total material energy, Mahat Tattva. Prithu Maharaj then offered the total designation of the living entity onto the supreme controller of illusory energy. Being released from all the designations by which the living entity became entrapped, he became free by knowledge and renunciation, and by the spiritual force of his devotional service. In this way, being situated in his original constitutional position of Krishna consciousness, he gave up his body as a Prabhu, or controller of the senses. The queen, the wife of Prithu Maharaj, whose name was Archi, followed her husband into the forest. Since she was a queen, her body was very delicate. Although she did not deserve to live in the forest, she voluntarily touched her lotus feet to the ground. Although she was not accustomed to such difficulties, Queen Archi followed her husband in the regulative principles of living in the forest like great sages. She lay down on the ground and ate only fruits, flowers, and leaves, and because she was not fit for these activities, she became frail and thin. Yet, because of the pleasure she derived from serving her husband, she did not feel any difficulties. When Queen Archi saw that her husband, who had been so merciful to her, and the earth no longer showed symptoms of life, she lamented for a little while, and then built a fiery pyre on top of a hill, and placed the body of her husband on it. After this, the queen executed the necessary funeral functions and offered oblations of water. After bathing in the river, she offered obeisances to various demigods situated in the sky in different planetary systems. She then circumambulated the fire, and while thinking of the lotus feet of her husband, entered its flames. After observing this brave act performed by the chaste wife Archi, the wife of the great Prithu, many thousands of wives of the demigods, along with their husbands, offered prayers to the queen, for they were very much satisfied. At that time, the demigods were situated on the top of Mandara hill, and all their wives began to shower flowers on the funeral pyre, and began to talk amongst themselves as follows. The wives of the demigods said, "All glories to Queen Archi. We can see that this queen of the great King Prithu, the emperor of all the kings of the world, has served her husband with mind, speech, and body, exactly as the goddess of fortune serves the supreme personality of Godhead, Yagyesha, or Vishnu." The wives of the demigods continued, "Just see how this chaste lady, Archi, by dint of her inconceivable pious activities, is still following her husband upward, as far as we can see. In this material world, every human being has a short span of life, but those who are engaged in devotional service go back home, back to Godhead, for they are actually on the path of liberation. For such persons, there is nothing which is not available. Any person who engages himself within this material world in performing activities that necessitate great struggle, and who, after obtaining a human form of life, which is the chance to attain liberation from the miseries, undertakes the difficult tasks of fruitive activities, must be considered great to be cheated and envious of his own self. The great sage Maitreya continued speaking, "My dear Vidura, when the wives of the denizens of heaven were thus talking amongst themselves, Queen Archi reached the planet with her husband. Maharaj Prithu, the topmost self-realized soul, had attained." Maitreya continued, "The greatest of all devotees, Maharaj Prithu, was very powerful, and his character was liberal, magnificent, and magnanimous. Thus I have described him to you as far as possible. Any person who describes the great characteristics of King Prithu with faith and determination, whether he reads or hears of them himself, or helps others to hear of them, is certain to attain the. If one hears the characteristics of Prithu Maharaj and is a Brahmana, he becomes perfectly qualified with Brahminical powers. If he is a Kshatriya, he becomes a king of the world. If he is a also, one who hears this narration 3 times will become very reputable if he is not recognized in society, and he will become a great scholar if he is illiterate. In other words, hearing the narrations of Prithu Maharaj is so auspicious that it drives away all bad luck. By hearing the narration of Prithu Maharaj, one can become great, increase his duration of life, gain promotion to the heavenly planets, and counteract the contaminations of this age of Kali. In addition, one can promote the cause of religion, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation. Therefore, from all sides, it is advisable for the materialistic person who is interested in such things to read and hear the narrations of the life and character of Prithu Maharaj. If a king who is desirous of attaining victory and ruling power chants the narration of Prithu Maharaj 3 times before going forth on his chariot, all subordinate kings will automatically render all kinds of taxes unto him, as they rendered them on to Maharaj Prithu, simply upon his order. A pure devotee who is executing the different processes of devotional service may be situated in the transcendental position, being completely absorbed in Krishna consciousness. But even he, while discharging devotional service, must hear, read, and induce others to hear about the character and life of Prithu Maharaj. The great sage Maitreya continued, "My dear Vidura, I have as far as possible spoken the narrations of Prithu Maharaj, which enrich one's devotional attitude. Whoever takes advantage of these benefits also goes back home, back to Godhead like Maharaj Prithu. Whoever, with great reverence and adoration, regularly reads, chants, and describes the history of Maharaj Prithu's activities will certainly increase unflinching faith and attraction for the lotus feet of the Lord. The Lord's lotus feet are the boat by which one can cross the ocean of nations. Thus end chapter 23 of the 4th canto, Maharaj Prithu's Going Back Home. Chapter 24. Chanting the song sung by Lord Shiva. The great sage Maitreya continued. Vijitashva, the eldest son of Maharaj Prithu, who had a reputation like his father's, became emperor and gave his younger brothers different directions of the world to govern, for he was very affectionate toward his brothers. Maharaj Vitishava offered the eastern part of the world to his brother Haryaksha, the southern part to Dumarakesha, the western part to Vrika, and the northern part to Dravina. Formerly, Maharaj Vatishva Vijitashva pleased the king of heaven, Indra, from him received the title of Antaradhana. His wife's name was Shikandini, and by her he begot 3 good sons. The 3 sons of Maharaj Antaradhana were named Pavaka, Pavamana, and Shuchi. Formerly, these 3 personalities were the demigods of fire, but due to the curse of the great sage Vasishta, they became the sons of Maharaj Antaradhana. As such, they were as powerful as the fire gods, and they attained the destination of mystic yoga power, being again situated as the demigods of fire. Maharaj Antaradhana had another wife named Nabhaswati, and by her he was happy to beget another son named Haridhana. Since Maharaj Antaradhana was very liberal, he did not kill Indra while the demigod was stealing his father's horse at the sacrifice. Whenever Antaradhana, the supreme royal power, had to exact taxes, punish his citizens, or fine them severely, he was not willing to do so. Consequently, he retired from the execution of such duties and engaged himself in the performance of different sacrifices. Although Maharaj Antaradhana was engaged in performing sacrifices, he became, because he was a self-realized soul, he very intelligently rendered devotional service to the Lord, who eradicates all the fears of his devotees. By thus worshipping the Supreme Lord, Maharaj Antaradhana, wrapped in ecstasy, attained his planet very easily. Haridhana, the son of Maharaj Antaradhana, had a wife named Havirdhani, who gave birth to 6 sons named Barhishat, Gaya, Shukla, Krishna, Satya, and Jitavrata. The great sage Maitreya continued, "My dear Vidura, Havirdhana's very powerful son, named Barhishat, was very expert in performing various kinds of fruitive sacrifices, and he was also expert in the practice of mystic yoga. By his great qualifications, he became known as Prajapati. Maharaj Barhishat executed many sacrifices all over the world. He scattered kusha grasses and kept the tops of the grasses pointed eastward. Maharaj Barhishat, henceforward known as Prashinabari, was ordered by the supreme demigod Lord Brahma to marry the daughter of the ocean named Shatadruti. Her bodily features were completely beautiful, and she was very young. She was decorated with the proper garments and when she came into the marriage arena and began circumambulating it, the fire god Agni became so attracted to her that he desired her company, exactly as he had formerly desired to enjoy Shuki. While Shatradruti was thus being married, the demons, the denizens of Gandharvaloka, the great sages, and the denizens of Siddhaloka, the earthly planets, and Nagaloka, although highly exalted, were all captivated by the tinkling of her ankle bells. King Prachinabhati begot 10 children in the womb of Shatadruti. All of them were equally endowed with religiosity, and all of them were known as the Prachetas. When all these Prachetas were ordered by their father to marry and beget children, they all entered the ocean and practiced austerities and penances for 10,000 years. Thus they worshipped the master of all austerities, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When all the sons of Prachinabhati left home to execute austerities, they met Lord Shiva, who out of great mercy instructed them about the absolute truth. All the sons of Prachinabhati meditated upon the instructions, chanting and worshipping them with great care and attention. Vidura asked Maitreya, "My dear Brahmana, why did the Prachetas meet Lord Shiva on the way? Please tell me how the meeting happened, how Lord Shiva became very pleased with them, and how he instructed them. Certainly, such talks are important, and I wish that you please be merciful upon me and describe them." The great sage Vidura continued, "O best of the Brahmanas, it is very difficult for living entities encaged within this material body to have personal contact with Lord Shiva. Even great sages who have no material attachments do not contact him, despite their always being absorbed in meditation to attain his personal contact. Lord Shiva, the most powerful demigod, second only to Lord Vishnu, is self-sufficient. Although he has nothing to aspire for in the material world, for the benefit of those in the material world, he is always busily engaged everywhere and is accompanied by his dangerous energies like Goddess Kali and Goddess Durga." The sage Maitreya continued, "My dear Vidura, because of their pious nature, all the sons of Prachinabhati very seriously accepted the words of their father with heart and soul, and with these words on their heads they went toward the west to execute their father's order. While traveling, the Prachetas happened to see a great reservoir of water which seemed almost as big as the ocean. The water of this lake was so calm and quiet that it seemed like the mind of a great soul, and its inhabitants, the aquatics, appeared very peaceful and happy to be under the protection of such a watery reservoir. In that great lake there were some different types of lotus flowers. Some of them were bluish, and some of them were red. Some of them grew at night, and some in the day, and some, like the Indivara lotus flower, in the evening. Combined together, the lotus flowers filled the lake so full that the lake appeared to be a great mine of such flowers. Consequently, on the shores there were swans and cranes, chakravaka, Karandava, and other beautiful water birds standing out. There were various trees and creepers on all sides of the lake, and there were mad bumblebees humming all about them. The trees appeared to be very jolly due to the sweet humming of the bumblebees, and the saffron which was contained in the lotus flowers was being thrown into the air. These all created such an atmosphere that it appeared as though a festival were taking place there. The sons of the king became very much amazed when they heard vibrations from various drums and kettle drums, along with other musical sounds pleasing to the ear. The Prachetas were fortunate to see Lord Shiva, the chief of the demigods, emerging from the water with his associates. His body luster was just like molten gold, and his throat was bluish. And he had 3 eyes, which looked very mercifully upon his devotees. He was accompanied by many musicians who were glorifying him. As soon as the Prachetas saw Lord Shiva, they immediately offered their obeisances in great amazement and fell down at the feet of the Lord. Lord Shiva became very pleased with the Prachetas because, generally, Lord Shiva is the protector of pious persons and persons of gentle behavior. Being very much pleased with the princes, he began to speak as follows. Lord Shiva said, "You are all the sons of King Prachinabhati, and I wish all good fortune to you. I also know what you are going to do, and therefore I am visible to you, just to show my mercy upon you." Lord Shiva continued, any person who is surrendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, the controller of everything, material nature as well as the living entity, is actually very dear to me. A person who executes his occupational duty properly for 100 births becomes qualified to occupy the post of Brahma, and if he becomes more qualified, he can approach Lord Shiva. A person who is directly surrendered to Lord Krishna or Vishnu in unalloyed devotional service is immediately promoted to the spiritual planets. Lord Shiva and other demigods attain these planets after the destruction of this material world. As are all devotees of the Lord, and as such I appreciate that you are as respectable as the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. I know in this way that the devotees also respect me, and that I am dear to them. Thus, no one can be as dear to the devotees as I am. Now, I shall chant one mantra which is not only transcendental, pure and auspicious, but is the best prayer for anyone who is aspiring to attain the ultimate goal of life. When I chant this mantra, please hear it carefully and attentively. The great sage Maitreya continued, out of his causeless mercy, the exalted personality, Lord Shiva, a great devotee of Lord Narayana, continued to speak to the king's sons who were standing with folded hands. Lord Shiva addressed the Supreme Personality of Godhead with the following prayer. O Supreme Personality of Godhead, all glories unto you. You are the most exalted of all self-realized souls. Since you are always auspicious for the self-realized, I wish that you be auspicious for me. You are worshipable by virtue of all perfect instructions. By virtue of all the perfect instructions you give. You are the Supersoul. Therefore, I offer my obeisances unto you as the Supreme Living Being. My Lord, you are the original, you are the origin of the creation. By virtue of the lotus flower which sprouts from your navel, you are the supreme controller of the senses and the sense objects, and you are also all-pervading Vasudev. You are most peaceful, and because of your self-illuminated existence, you are not disturbed by the 6 kinds of transformations. My dear Lord, you are the origin of the subtle material ingredients, the master of all integration as well as the master of all disintegration, the predominating deity named Sankarshan, the master of all intelligence, known as the predominating deity Pradyumna. Therefore, I offer my respectful obeisances on to you. My Lord, as the supreme directing deity known as Aniruddha, you are the master of the senses and the mind. Therefore, I therefore offer my obeisances unto you again and again. You are known as Ananta as well as Sankarshan, because of your ability to destroy the whole creation by the blazing fire from your mouth. My Lord, O Aniruddha, you are the authority by which the doors of the higher planetary systems and liberation are opened. You are always within the pure heart of the living entity. Therefore, I offer my obeisances unto you. You are the possessor of semen which is like gold, and thus, in the form of fire, you help the Vedic sacrifices, beginning with Chaturhotra. Therefore, I offer my obeisances unto you. My Lord, you are the provider of the Pitralokas, as well as all demigods. You are the predominating deity of the moon, and the master of all three Vedas. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you, because you are the original source of satisfaction for all living entities. My dear Lord, you are the gigantic universal form which contains all the individual bodies of the living entities. You are the maintainer of the three worlds, and as such, you maintain the mind, senses, body, and air of life within them. I therefore offer my respectful obeisances unto you. My dear Lord, by expanding your transcendental vibrations, you reveal the actual meaning of everything. You are the all-pervading sky within and without. You are the ultimate goal of pious activities executed both within the material world and beyond it. I therefore offer my respectful obeisances unto you again and again. My dear Lord, you are the viewer of the results of pious activities. You are inclination, disinclination, and their resultant activities. You are the cause of the miserable conditions of life caused by irreligion, and therefore you are death. I offer my respectful obeisances. My dear Lord, you are the topmost of all bestowers of all benedictions, the oldest and supreme enjoyer amongst all enjoyers. You are the master of all the world's metaphysical philosophy. You are the supreme cause of all causes. Lord Krishna, you are the greatest of all religious principles, the supreme mind, and you have a brain which is never checked by any condition. Therefore, I repeatedly offer my obeisances unto you. My dear Lord, you are the supreme controller of the workers, sense activities, and results of sense activities, karma. Therefore, you are the controller of the body, mind, and senses. You are the supreme controller of egotism, known as Rudra. You are the source of knowledge and the activities of the Vedic injunctions. My dear Lord, I wish to see you exactly in the form that your very dear devotees worship. You have many other forms, but I wish to see your form that is especially liked by the devotees. Please be merciful upon me and show me that form, for only that form worshipped by devotees can perfectly satisfy all the demands of the senses. The Lord's beauty resembles a dark cloud during the rainy season. As the rainfall glistens, his bodily features also glisten. Indeed, he is the sum total of all beauty. The Lord has 4 arms, and exquisitely beautiful face, with eyes like lotus petals. A beautiful, highly raised nose, a mind-attracting smile, a beautiful forehead, and equally beautiful and fully decorated ears. The Lord is super excellently beautiful on account of his open and merciful smile and his sidelong glances upon his devotees. His black hair is curly, and his garments, waving in the mind, appear like flying saffron, pollen from lotus flowers. His glittering earrings, shining hearts, helmet, bangles, garland, ankle bells, waist belt, and various bodily ornaments combined with conch shell, disc, club, and lotus flower to increase the natural beauty of the Kashtupa pearl on his chest. The Lord has shoulders just like a lion's. Thereupon these shoulders are garlands, necklaces, and epaulets, and all of these are always glittering. Besides these, there is the beauty of the Kashtupa Mani pearl. And on the dark chest of the Lord there are streaks named Srivatsa, which are signs of the goddess of fortune. The glittering of these streaks excels the beauty of the golden streaks on the gold testing stone. Indeed, such beauty defeats a gold testing stone. The Lord's abdomen is beautiful due to 3 ripples in the flesh. Being so round, his abdomen resembles the leaf of a banyan tree, and when he exhales and inhales, the movements of the ripple appear very, very beautiful. The coils within the navel of the Lord are so deep that it appears that the entire universe sprouted out of it and yet again wishes to go back. The lower part of the Lord's waist is dark and covered with yellow garments, and a belt bedecked with golden embroidery work. His symmetrical lotus feet and the calves, thighs, and belt and joints of his legs are extraordinarily beautiful. Indeed, the Lord's entire body appears to be well built. My dear Lord, your 2 lotus feet are so beautiful that they appear like 2 blossoming petals on the lotus flower, which grows during the autumn season. Indeed, the nails of your lotus feet emanate such a great effulgence that they immediately dissipate all the darkness in the heart of a conditioned soul. My dear Lord, kindly show me that form of yours which always dissipates all kinds of darkness in the heart of a devotee. My dear Lord, you are the supreme spiritual master of everyone. Therefore, all conditioned souls covered with darkness of ignorance can be enlightened by you as the spiritual master. My dear Lord, those who desire to purify their existence must always engage in meditation upon your lotus feet as described above. Those who are serious about executing their occupational duties and who want freedom from fear must take to this process of bhakti yoga. My dear Lord, the king in charge of the heavenly kingdom is also desirous of obtaining the ultimate goal of life, devotional service. Similarly, you are the ultimate destination of those who identify themselves with you, Aham Brahmasmi. However, it is very difficult for them to attain you, whereas a devotee can very easily attain your lordship. My dear Lord, pure devotional service is even difficult for liberated persons to discharge, but devotional service alone can satisfy you. Who will take to other processes of self-realization if he is actually serious about the perfection of life? Simply by expansion of his eyebrows, invincible time personified can immediately vanquish the entire universe. However formidable time does not approach the devotee who has taken complete shelter at your lotus feet. If by one chance associates with a devotee, even for a fraction of a moment, he no longer is subject to attraction by the results of karma or jnana. What interest, then, can he have in the benedictions of the demigods who are subject to the laws of birth and death? My dear Lord, your lotus feet are the cause of all auspicious things and the destroyer of all the contamination of sin. I therefore beg your Lordship to bless me by the association of your devotees, who are completely purified by worshipping your lotus feet, and who are so merciful upon the conditioned souls. I think that your real benediction will be to allow me to associate with such devotees. The devotee whose heart has been completely cleansed by the process of devotional service and who is favored by Bhakti Devi does not become bewildered by the external energy, which is just like a dark well. Being completely cleansed of material contamination, in this way a devotee is able to understand very happily your name, fame, form, activities, and so on. My dear Lord, the impersonal Brahman spreads everywhere, like the sunshine or the sky, and that impersonal Brahman, which spreads throughout the universe and in which the entire universe is manifested, is you. My dear Lord, you have manifold energies, and these energies are manifested in manifold forms. With such energies, you have also created this cosmic manifestation. And although you maintain it as if it were permanent, you ultimately annihilate it. Although you are never disturbed by such changes and alterations, the living entities are disturbed by them, and therefore they find the cosmic manifestation to be different or separated from you. My Lord, you are always independent, and I can clearly see this fact. My dear Lord, your universal form consists of all 5 elements: the senses, mind, intelligence, false ego, which is material, and the Paramatma, your partial expansion, who is the director of everything. Yogis other than the devotees, namely the Karma Yogis and Jnani Yogi, worship you by their respective actions in their respective positions. It is stated both in the Vedas and in the Shastras that are corollaries of the Vedas, and indeed everywhere, that it is only you who are to be worshipped. That is the expert vision of all the Vedas. My dear Lord, you are the Supreme Person, the cause of all causes. Before the creation of this material world, your material energy remained in a dormant condition. When your material energy is agitated, the 3 qualities, namely goodness, passion, and ignorance, act, and as a result of the total material energy, egotism, ether, air, fire, water, earth, and all the various demigods and saintly persons becomes manifest. Thus the material world is created. My dear Lord, after creating by your own potencies, you enter within the creation of 4 kinds of forms. Being within the hearts of the living entities, you know them and know how they are enjoying their senses. The so-called happiness of this material creation is exactly like the bee's enjoyment of honey after it has been collected in the honeycomb. My dear Lord, your absolute authority cannot be directly experienced, but one can guess by seeing the activities of the world that everything is being destroyed in due course of time. The force of time is very strong, and everything is being destroyed by something else, just as one animal is being eaten by another animal. Time scatters everything, exactly as the wind scatters clouds in the sky. My dear Lord, all living entities within this material world are mad after planning for things, and they are always busy with a desire to do this or that. This is due to uncontrollable greed. The greed for material enjoyment is always existing in the living entity, but your lordship is always alert, and in due course of time you strike him, just as a snake seizes a mouse and verily easily swallows him. My dear Lord, any learned person knows that unless he worships you, his entire life is spoiled. Knowing this, how could he give up worshipping your lotus feet? Even our fathers and spiritual master, Lord Brahma, unhesitatingly worshipped you, and the 14 Manus followed in his footsteps. My dear Lord, all actually learned persons know you as the Supreme Brahman and the Supersoul, although the entire universe is afraid of Lord Rudra, who ultimately annihilates everything. For the learned devotees, you are the fearless destination of all. My dear sons of the king, just execute your occupational duty as kings with a pure heart. Just chant this prayer, fixing your minds on the lotus feet of the Lord. That will bring you all good fortune, for the Lord will be very much pleased with you. Therefore, O son of the king, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, is situated in everyone's heart. He is also within your hearts. Therefore, chant the glories of the Lord, and always meditate upon him continuously. My dear princes, in the form of a prayer you have delineated the yoga system of chanting the holy name. All of you should take this important stotra within your mind and promise to keep it in order to become great sages. By acting silently like a great sage, and by giving attention and reverence, you should practice this method. This prayer was first spoken to us by Lord Brahma, the master of all creators. The creator, headed by Bhrigu, were instructed in these prayers because they wanted to create. When all the Prajapatis were ordered to create by Lord Brahma, we chanted these prayers in praise of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and became completely free from all the ignorance. Thus, we were able to create different types of living entities. A devotee of Lord Krishna, whose mind is always absorbed in him, who, with great attention and reverence, chants this stotra prayer, will achieve the greatest perfection of life without delay. In this material world, there are different types of achievement, but of all of them, the achievement of knowledge is considered to be the highest, because one can cross the ocean of nations only on the boat of knowledge. Otherwise, the ocean is impassable. Although rendering devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and worshipping him are very difficult, if one vibrates or simply reads this stotra prayer, composed and sung by me, he will very easily be able to invoke the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the dearmost objective of all auspicious benedictions. A human being who sings this song, sung by me, can please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Such a devotee, being fixed in the Lord's devotional service, can acquire whatever he wants from the Supreme Lord. A devotee who rises early in the morning and with folded hands chants these prayers sung by Lord Shiva and gives faculty to others to hear them certainly becomes free from all bondage to fruitive activities. My dear sons of the king, the prayers I have recited to you are meant for pleasing the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supersoul. I advise you to recite these prayers, which are as effective as great austerities. In this way, when you are mature, your life will be successful, and you will certainly achieve all your desired objectives without fail. Thus end chapter 24 of the 4th canto, chanting the songs sung by Lord Shiva. Chapter 25. The descriptions of the characteristics of King Puranjana. The great sage Maitreya continued speaking to Vidura. My dear Vidura, in this way Lord Shiva instructed the sons of King Bharishat. The sons of the king also worshipped Lord Shiva with great devotion and respect. Finally, Lord Shiva became invisible to the princes. All the Bracheta princes simply stood in the water for 10,000 years and recited these prayers, and recited the prayers given to them by Lord Shiva. While the princes were undergoing severe austerities in the water, their father was performing different types of fruitive activities. At this time, the great saint Narada, master and teacher of all spiritual life, became very compassionate upon the king and decided to instruct him about spiritual life. Narada Muni asked King Prachinabharishat, My dear king, what do you desire to achieve by performing these fruitive activities? The chief aim of life is to get rid of all miseries and enjoy happiness. But these two things cannot be realized by fruitive activity. The king replied, O great soul, Narada, my intelligence is entangled in fruitive activities. Therefore I do not know the ultimate goal of life. Kindly instruct me in pure knowledge so that I can get out of the entanglement of fruitive activities. Those who are interested only in the so-called beautiful life, namely, remaining as a householder entangled by sons and a wife and searching after wealth, think that such things are life's ultimate goal. Such people simply wander in different types of bodies throughout this material existence without finding the ultimate goal of life. The great Saint Narada said, O ruler of the citizens, my dear king, please see in the sky those animals which you have sanctified without compassion and without mercy in the sacrificial arena. All these animals are awaiting your death so that they can avenge the injuries you have inflicted upon them. After you die, they will angrily pierce your body with iron horns. In this connection, I wish to narrate an old history connected with the character of a king called Puranjana. Please try to hear with great attention. My dear king, once in the past lived a king named Puranjana, who was celebrated for his great activities. He had a friend named Avigyanta, the unknown one. No one could understand the activities of Avigyanta. King Puranjana began to search for a suitable place to live, and thus he traveled all over the world. Even after a great deal of traveling, he could not find a place just to his liking. Finally, he became morose and disappointed. King Puranjana had unlimited desire for sense enjoyment. Consequently, he traveled all over the world to find a place where all his desires could be fulfilled. Unfortunately, he found a feeling of insufficiency everywhere. Once, while wandering in this way, he saw on the southern side of the Himalayas, in a place named Bharatvarsh, India, a city that had 9 gates all about and was characterized by all auspicious facilities. That city was surrounded by walls and parks, and within it were towers, canals, windows, and outlets. The houses were decorated with domes made of gold, silver, and iron. The floors of the of the houses in that city were made of sapphire, crystal, diamonds, pearls, emeralds, and rubies. Because of their luster, the houses in the capital, the city, was compared to the celestial town named Bhagavati. In that city, there were many assembly houses, street crossings, street restaurants, gambling houses, markets, resting places, flags, festoons, and beautiful parks. All these surrounded the city. On the outskirts of that city were many beautiful trees and creepers encircling a nice lake. Also surrounding that lake were many groups of birds and bees that were always chanting and humming. The branches of the trees standing on the bank of the lake received particles of water carried by the spring air from the falls coming down from the icy mountain. In such an atmosphere, even the animals of the forest became non-violent and non-envious like great sages. Consequently, the animals did not attack anyone. Over and above everything was the cooing of the cuckoos. Any passenger passing along that path was invited by that atmosphere to take rest in that nice garden. While wandering here and there in that wonderful garden, King Puranjana suddenly came in contact with a beautiful woman who was walking there without any engagement. She had 10 servants with her, and each servant had hundreds of wives accompanying him. The woman was protected on all sides by a 5-hooded snake. She was very beautiful and young, and she appeared very anxious to find a suitable husband. The woman's nose, teeth, forehead were all very beautiful. Her ears were equally very beautiful and bedecked with dazzling earrings. The waist and hips of the woman were very beautiful. She was dressed in a yellow sari with a golden belt. While she walked, her ankle bells rang. She appeared exactly like the denizens of the heavens. With the end of her sari, the woman was trying to cover her breasts, which were equally round and well placed, side by side. She again and again tried to cover them out of shyness, while she walked exactly like a great elephant. Puranjana, the hero, became attracted by the eyebrows and smiling face of the very beautiful girl, and was immediately pierced by the arrows of her lusty desires. When she smiled shyly, she looked very beautiful to Puranjana, who, although a hero, could not refrain from addressing her. "My dear lotus-eyed, kindly explain to me where you are coming from, who you are, and whose daughter you are. You appear very chaste. What is the purpose of your coming here? What are you trying to do? Please explain all these things to me. My dear lotus-eyed, who are those 11 strong bodyguards with you, and who are those 10 specific servants? Who are those women following the 10 servants, and who is the snake that is protecting you? You dear beautiful girl, you are exactly like the goddess of fortune, or the wife of Lord Shiva, or the goddess of learning, the wife of Lord Brahma. Although you must be one of them, I see that you are loitering in this forest. Indeed, you are as silent as the great sages. Is it that you are searching after your own husband? Whoever your husband may be, simply by understanding that you are so faithful to him, he will come to possess all opulences. I think you must be the goddess of fortune, but I do not see the lotus flower in your hand. Therefore, I am asking you where you have thrown that lotus. O greatly fortunate one, it appears that you are none of the women I have mentioned, because I see that your feet are touching the ground. But if you are some woman of this planet, can you, like the goddess of fortune who accompanied by Lord Vishnu, increase the beauty of Vaikuntha planets, also increase the beauty of this city by associating with me? You should understand that I am a great hero and a very powerful king on this planet. Certainly, your glancing upon me has very much agitated my mind. Your smile, which is full of shyness, but at the same time lusty, is agitating the most powerful Cupid within me. Therefore, O most beautiful, I ask you to be merciful upon me. My dear girl, your face is so beautiful, with your nice eyebrows and eyes, and with your bluish hair scattered about. In addition, very sweet sounds are coming from your mouth. Nonetheless, you are so covered with shyness that you do not see me face to face. I therefore request you, my dear girl, to smile and kindly raise your head to see me. Narada continued, My dear king, when Puranjana became so attracted and impatient to touch the girl and enjoy her, that girl also became attracted by his words and accepted his request by smiling. By this time, she was certainly attracted by the king. The girl said, O best of human beings, I do not know who has begotten me. I cannot speak with you perfectly about this, nor do I know the names or the origin of the associates with me. O great hero, we only know that we are all existing in this place. We do not know what will come after. Indeed, we are so foolish that we do not care to understand who has created this beautiful place with our residence. My dear gentlemen, all these men and women with me are known as my friends, and the snake, who always remains awake, protects this city even during my sleeping hours. So much I know. I do not know anything beyond this. O killer of the enemy, you have somehow or other come here. This is certainly great fortune for me. I wish all auspicious things for you. You have a great desire to satisfy your senses, and all my friends and I shall try our best in all respects to fulfill your desires. My dear Lord, I have just arranged this city of 9 gates for you, so that you can have all kinds of sense gratification. You may live here for 100 years, and everything for your sense gratification will be supplied. How can I expect to unite with others who are neither conversant about sex nor capable of knowing how to enjoy life while living after death? Such foolish persons are like animals because they do not know the process of sense enjoyment in this life and after death. The woman continued, In this material world, a householder's life brings all kinds of happiness in religion, economic development, sense gratification, and the beginning of children, sons and grandsons. After that, one may desire liberation as well as material reputation. The householder can appreciate the results of sacrifices which enable him to gain promotion to superior planetary systems. All this material happiness is practically unknown to the transcendentalists. They cannot even imagine such happiness. The woman continued, According to authorities, the householder life is pleasing not only to oneself, but to all the forefathers, demigods, great sages, saintly persons, and everyone else. A householder life is thus beneficial. O my dear hero, who in this world will not accept a husband like you? You are so famous and magnanimous, so beautiful and so easily gotten. O mighty armed, who in this world will not be attracted by your arms, which are just like bodies of serpents? Actually, you relieve the distress of husbandless women like us by your attractive smile and your aggressive mercy. We think that you are traveling on the surface of the earth just to benefit us." The great sage Narada continued, "My dear king, those two, the man and the woman, supporting one another through mutual understanding, entered that city and enjoyed life for 100 years. Many professional singers used to sing about the glories of King Puranjana and his glorious activities. When it was too hot in the summer, he used to enter a reservoir of water. He would surround himself with many women and enjoy their company. Of the 9 gates in that city, 7 were on the surface, and 2 were subterranean. A total of 9 doors were constructed, and these led to different places. All gates were used by the city's governor. My dear king, of the 9 doors, 5 led toward the eastern side, 1 led toward the northern side, 1 led toward the southern side, and 2 led toward the western side. I shall try to give the names of these different doors. The 2 gates named Kadyota and Avirmukhi were situated facing the eastern side, but they were constructed in one place. Through those gates the king used to go to the city of Vibrajita, accompanied by a friend whose name was Juman. Similarly, in the east there were 2 sets of gates named Nalini and Nalini, and these were also constructed in one place. Through these gates the king, accompanied by his friend named Avaduta, was used to go to the city of Saurabha. The 5th gate, situated on the eastern side, was named Mukhya, or the chief. Through this gate, accompanied by his friends named Rasagya and Vipana, he used to visit the 2 places named Bahudana and Apana. The southern gate of the city was known as Pitruho. Through that gate, King Puranjana used to visit the city named Dakshina Panchala, accompanied by his friend Shrutardhara. On the northern side was the gate named Devahu. Through that gate, King Puranjana used to go with his friend Shrutardhara to the place known as Uttara Panchala. On the western side was the gate named Asuri. Through that gate, King Puranjana used to go to the city Gramaka, accompanied by his friend Dhurmada. Another gate on the western side was known as Niriti. Puranjana used to go through the gate and to the place known as Vaishasa, accompanied with his friend Lubdhaka. Of the many inhabitants of the city, there are 2 persons named Nirvaka and Pishakrita. Although King Puranjana was the ruler of the citizens who possessed eyes, he unfortunately used to associate with these blind men. Accompanied by them, he used to go here and there and perform various activities. Sometimes he used to go to his private home with one of his chief servants, the mind, whose name Vishuchina. Sometimes he used to go to his private home with one of the chief servants. At that time, illusion, satisfaction, and happiness used to be produced from his wife and children. Being thus entangled in different types of mental concoction and entangled in fruitive activities, King Puranjana came completely under the control of material intelligence and was thus cheated indeed. Indeed, he used to fulfill all desires for his wife, the queen. When the queen drank liquor, King Puranjana also engaged in drinking. When the queen dined, he used to dine with her, and when she chewed, King Puranjana used to chew along with her. When the queen sang, he also sang. Similarly, when the queen cried, he also cried, and when the king laughed, he also laughed. When the queen talked loosely, he also talked loosely. And when the queen walked, the king walked behind her. When the queen would stand still, the king would also stand still. And when the queen would lie down in his bed, he would also follow and lie down with her. When the queen sat, he would also sit. And when the queen heard something which he would follow her to hear the same thing. When the queen saw something, the king would also look at it. And when the queen smelled something, the king would follow her to smell the same thing. When the queen touched something, the king would also touch it. And when the queen was lamenting, the poor king had to follow her in lamentation. In the same way, when the queen felt enjoyment, he also enjoyed, and the queen was satisfied, and the king also felt satisfaction. In this way, King Purandjana was captivated by his nice wife, and was thus cheated. Indeed, he became cheated in his whole existence, in the material world. Even against that poor foolish king's desire, he remained under the control of his wife, just like a pet animal that dances around according to the order of its master. End of chapter 25. The descriptions of the characteristics of King Purandjana. Chapter 26. King Purandjana goes to the forest to hunt, and his queen becomes angry. The great sage Narada continued, My dear king, once upon a time, a King Purandjana took up his great bow, and equipped with golden armor and a quiver of unlimited arrows, and accompanied by 11 commanders, he sat on his chariot driven by 5 swift horses, and went to the forest named Panchaprashta. He took with him in that chariot 2 explosive arrows. The chariot itself was situated on 2 wheels and 1 revolving axle. On the chariot were 3 flags, 1 rein, 1 chariot driver, 1 sitting place, 2 poles, which the harness was fixed, 5 weapons, and 7 coverings. The chariot moved in 5 different styles, and 5 obstacles lay before it. All the directions of the chariot were made of gold. All the decorations of the chariot were made of gold. It was almost impossible for King Purandjana to give up the company of his queen, even for a moment. Nonetheless, on that day, being very much inspired by the desire to hunt, he took up his bow and arrow with great pride and went to the forest, not caring for his wife. At that time, King Purandjana was very much influenced by demoniac propensities. Because of this, his heart became very hard and merciless, and with sharp arrows he killed many innocent animals in the forest, taking no consideration. If a king is too attracted to eating flesh, he may, according to the directions of the revealed scriptures on sacrificial performances, go to the forest and kill some animals that are recommended for killing. One is not allowed to kill animals unnecessarily or without restriction. The Vedas regulate animal killing to stop the extravagance of foolish men influenced by the modes of passion and ignorance. Narada Muni continued to speak to King Prachinabarashit. My dear king, any person who works according to the directions of the Vedic scripture does not become involved in fruitive activities. Otherwise, a person who acts whimsically falls down due to false prestige. Thus he becomes involved in the laws of nature, which are composed of the 3 qualities, goodness, passion, and ignorance. In this way, the living entity becomes devoid of his real intelligence and becomes perpetually lost in the city of birth and death. Thus he goes up and down from a microbe in stool to a high position in the Brahmaloka planet. When King Purandjana was hunting in this way, many animals within the forest lost their lives with great pain, being pierced by the sharp arrowheads. Upon seeing these devastatingly ghastly activities performed by the king, all the people who were merciful by nature became very unhappy. Such merciful persons could not tolerate seeing the killing. In this way, King Puranjana killed many animals, including rabbits, boars, buffaloes, bison, black deer, porcupines, and other game animals. After killing and killing, the king became very tired. After this, the king, very much fatigued, hungry, and thirsty, returned to his royal palace. After returning, he took a bath and had an appropriate dinner. Then he took rest and thus became freed from all restlessness. After this, King Puranjana decorated his body with suitable ornaments. He also smeared scented sandalwood pulp over his body and put on flower garlands. In this way, he became completely refreshed. After this, he began to search out his queen. After taking his dinner and having his thirst and hunger satisfied, King Puranjana felt some joy within his heart. Instead of being elevated to higher consciousness, he became captivated by Cupid and was moved by desire to find his wife, who kept him satisfied in his household life. At that time, King Puranjana was a little anxious, and he inquired from the household women, "My dear beautiful women, are you and your mistress all very happy like before, or not?" King Puranjana said, "I do not understand why my household paraphernalia does not attract me as before. I think that if there is neither a mother nor devoted wife at home, the home is like a chariot without wheels. Where is the fool who will sit down on such an unworkable chariot? Kindly let me know the whereabouts of that beautiful woman who always saves me when I am drowning in the ocean of danger. By giving me good intelligence at every step, she always saves me." All the women addressed the king, "O master of the citizens, we do not know why your dear wife has taken on this sort of existence. O killer of enemies, kindly look. She is lying on the ground without bedding. We cannot understand why she is acting like this." The great sage Narada continued, "My dear King Prachinabhati, as soon as the king Puranjana saw his queen lying on the ground, appearing like a mendicant, he immediately became bewildered. The king, with a grieved mind, began to speak to his wife with very pleasing words. Although he was filled with regret and tried to pacify her, he could not see any symptoms of anger caused by love within the heart of his beloved wife. Because the king was very expert in flattery, he began to pacify his queen very slowly. First, he touched her 2 feet, then embraced her nicely, sitting her on his lap, and began to speak as follows. King Puranjana said, "My dear, beautiful wife, when a master accepts a servant as his own man, but does not punish him for his offense, the servant must be considered unfortunate. My dear slender maiden, when a master chastises his servants, the servant should accept this as great mercy. One who becomes angry must be very foolish not to know that such a duty is of his friend. My dear wife, your teeth are very beautifully set, and your attractive features make you appear very thoughtful. Kindly give up your anger, be merciful upon me, and please smile upon me with loving attachment. When I see a smile on your beautiful face, and when I see your hair, which is as beautiful as the color blue, and see your raised nose and hear your sweet talk, you will become more beautiful to me, and thus attract me and oblige me. You are my most respectable mistress. O hero's wife, please kindly tell me if someone has offended you. I am prepared to give such a person punishment as long as he does not belong to the Brahmana caste. But for the servant of Muraripur, Krishna, I excuse no one within or beyond these 3 worlds. No one can freely move after offending you, for I am prepared to punish him. My dear wife, on this day I have never seen your face without tilak decorations, nor have I seen you so morose and without luster or affection. nor have I seen your 2 nice breasts wet with tears from your eyes. Nor have I ever before seen your lips, which are ordinarily as red as the bimba fruit, without their reddish hue. My dear queen, due to my sinful desires, I went to the forest to hunt without asking you. Therefore, I must admit that I have offended you. Nonetheless, thinking of me as your most intimate subordinate, you should still be very much pleased with me. Factually, I am very much bereaved, but being pierced by the arrow of Cupid, I am feeling lusty. But where is the beautiful woman who would give up her lusty husband and refuse to unite with him? Thus end chapter 26 of the 4th canto. King Puranjana goes to the forest to hunt, and his queen becomes angry. Chapter 27. Attack by Kandavega on the city of King Puranjana. The character of... I don't know what the rest. The great sage Narada continued, My dear king, after bewildering her husband in different ways and bringing him under her control, the wife of King Puranjana gave him all satisfaction and enjoyed sex life with him. The queen took her bath and dressed herself nicely with all auspicious garments and ornaments. After taking food and becoming completely satisfied, she returned to the king. Upon seeing her beautifully decorated, attractive face, the king welcomed her with all devotion. Queen Puranjani embraced the king, and the king also responded by embracing her shoulders. In this way, in a solitary place, they enjoyed joking words. Thus, King Puranjana became very much captivated by his beautiful wife and deviated from the good sense. He forgot that the passing of days and nights meant that his span of life was being reduced without profit. In this way, increasingly overwhelmed by illusion, King Puranjana, although advanced in consciousness, remained always lying down with his head on the pillow of his wife's arms. In this way, he considered women to be his ultimate life and soul. Becoming thus overwhelmed by the mode of ignorance, he could not understand the meaning of self-realization, or of his self, or of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. My dear King Prachinabarishad, in this way, King Puranjana, with his heart full of lust and sinful reactions, began to enjoy sex with his wife, and in this way, his new life and youth expired in half a moment. The great sage Narada then addressed King Prachinabarishad. O one whose lifespan is great, Virat. In this way, King Puranjana begot 1,100 sons within the womb of his wife, Puranjini. However, in this business, he passed away half of his lifespan. O Prajapati, King Prachinabarishad, in this way, King Puranjana also begot 110 daughters. All of these were equally glorified like the father and mother. Their behavior was gentle, and they possessed magnanimity and other good qualities. After this, King Puranjana, the king of the Panchala country, in order to increase the descendants of his paternal family, married his sons with qualified wives and married his daughters with qualified husbands. One of these many sons each produced hundreds and hundreds of grandsons. In this way, the whole city of Panchala became overcrowded by the sons and grandsons of King Puranjana. These sons and grandsons were virtually plunderers of King Puranjana's riches, including his home, treasury, servants, secretaries, and all other paraphernalia. Puranjana's attachment for these things was very deep-rooted. The great sage Narada continued, My dear King Prachinabarishad, like like you, King Puranjana became implicated in so many desires. Thus he worshipped demigods, forefathers, and social leaders with various sacrifices, which were all very ghastly because they were inspired by the desire to kill animals. Thus King Puranjana, being attached to fruitive activities, karma kandiya, as well as kith and kin, and being obsessed with polluted consciousness, eventually arrived at the point not very much liked by those who are overly attached to material things. O king, in Gandharvaloka there was a king named Chandavega. Under him there were 360 very powerful Gandharva soldiers. Along with Chandavega were as many female Gandharvis as there were soldiers, and all of them repetitively plundered all the paraphernalia for sense enjoyment. When King Gandharvaraj Chandavega and his followers began to plunder the city of Puranjana, the snake with 5 hoods began to defend the city. The 5-hooded serpent, the superintendent and protector of the city of King Puranjana, fought with the Gandharvas for 100 years. He fought alone, and all of them, although they numbered 720. Because he had to fight alone with so many soldiers, all of whom were great warriors, the serpent with 5 hoods became very weak. Seeing that his most intimate friend was weakening, King Puranjana and his friends and citizens living within the city all became very anxious. King Puranjana collected taxes in the city, known as Panchala, and thus was able to engage in sexual indulgence. Being completely under the control of women, he could not understand that his life was passing away and that he was reaching the point of death. My dear King Prachinabarishit, at this time the daughter of the formidable time was seeking her husband through the 3 worlds. Although no one agreed to accept her, she came. The daughter of time, Jara, was very unfortunate. Consequently, she was known as Durbhaga, ill-fated. However, she was once pleased with a great king, and because the king accepted her, she granted him a great benediction. When I once came to this earth from Brahmaloka, the highest planetary system, the daughter of time, wandering over the universe, met me. Knowing me to be an avowed brahmachari, she became lusty and proposed that I accept her. The great sage Narada continued, when I refused to accept her request, she became very angry at me and cursed me severely. Because I refused her request, she said that I would not be able to stay in one place for a very long time. After she was thus disappointed by me, with my permission she approached the king of the Yavanas, whose name was Bhaya, or fear. She accepted him as her husband. Approaching the king of the Yavanas, Kalakanya addressed him as a great hero, saying, My dear sir, you are best of the untouchables, and I am in love with you, and I want you as my husband. I know that no one else is baffled if he makes friends with you. One who does not give charity according to the customs and injunctions of the scriptures, and one who does not accept charity in that way, are considered to be in the mode of ignorance. Such persons follow the path of the foolish. Surely they must lament at the end. Kalakanya continued, O gentle one, I am now present before you to serve you. Please accept me and thus show me mercy. It is the gentleman's greatest duty to be compassionate upon a person who is distressed. After hearing the statement of Kalakanya, daughter of time, the king of the Yavanas began to smile and devise a means for executing his confidential duty on the behalf of the provinces. He then addressed Kalakanya as follows. The king of the Yavanas replied, After much consideration, I have arrived at the husband for you. Actually, as far as everyone is concerned, you are inauspicious and mischievous. Since no one likes you, how can anyone accept you as his wife? This world is a product of fruitive activities. Therefore, you may imperceptibly attack in general, helped by many soldiers. You can kill them without opposition. The king of the Yavanas continued, Here is my brother, Prajvara. I now accept you as my sister, and I shall employ both of you, as well as my many dangerous soldiers, to act imperceptibly within this world. Thus ends chapter 27 of the 4th canto, Attack by Chandavega on the city of King Puranjana. Chapter 28, Puranjana becomes a woman in the next life. Chapter 28, King Puranjana becomes a woman in the next life. The great sage Narada continued, My dear King Prachinabarshad, afterward, the king of the Yavanas, whose name is Fear itself, as well as Prajvara, Kalakanya, and his soldiers began to travel all over the world. Once the dangerous soldiers attacked the city of Puranjana with great force. Although the city was full of paraphernalia for sense gratification, it was being protected by the old serpent. Gradually, Kalakanya, with the help of dangerous soldiers, attacked all the inhabitants of King Puranjana's city, and thus rendered them useless for all purposes. When Kalakanya, daughter of time, attacked the body, the dangerous soldiers of the king of the Yavanas entered the city through different gates. They then began to give severe troubles to all the citizens. When the city was thus engaged by the soldiers, and Kalakanya, King Puranjana, being overly absorbed in affection for his family, was placed in difficulty by the attack of Yavana Raj and Kalakanya. When King Puranjana was embraced by Kalakanya, he gradually lost all his beauty. Having been too much addicted to sex, he became very poor in intelligence and lost all his opulence. Being bereft of all possessions, he was conquered forcibly by the Gandharvas and the Yavanas. King Puranjana then saw that everything in his town was scattered and that his sons, grandsons, servants, and ministers were all gradually opposing him. He also noted that his wife was becoming cold and indifferent. When King Puranjana saw that all his family members, relatives, followers, servants, secretaries, and everyone else had turned against him, he certainly became very anxious. But he could not counteract the situation because he was thoroughly overwhelmed by Kalakanya. The object of enjoyment becomes stale by the influence of Kalakanya due to the continuance of his lusty desires. King Puranjana became very poor in everything. Thus he did not understand the aim of life. He was still very affectionate toward his wife and children, and he worried about maintaining them. The the city of King Puranjana was overcome by the Gandharva and Yavana soldiers, and although the king had no desire to leave the city, he was circumstantially forced to do so, for it was smashed by Kalakanya. Under the circumstances, the elder brother of the Yavana Raj, known as Prajwara, set fire to the city to please his younger brother, whose other name is Fear itself. When the city was set ablaze, all the citizens and servants of the king, as well as all family members, sons, grandsons, wives, and other relatives, were within the fire. King Puranjana thus became very unhappy. The city's superintendent of police, the serpent, saw that the citizens were being attacked by Kalakanya, and he became very aggrieved to see his own residence set ablaze after being attacked by the Yavanas. As the serpent, living within the cavity of a tree, wishes to leave when there is a forest fire, so the city's police superintendent, the snake, wished to leave the city due to the fire's severe heat. The limbs of the serpent's bodies were slackened by the Gandharvas and the Yavana soldiers, who had thoroughly defeated his bodily strength. When he attempted to leave the body, he was checked by his enemies. Being thus baffled in his attempt, he began to cry loudly. King Puranjana then began to think of his daughters, sons, grandsons, daughters-in-law, sons-in-law, servants, and other associates, as well as his house, his household paraphernalia, and his little accumulation of wealth. King Puranjana was so overly attached to his family and conceptions of I and mine. Because he was overly attached to his wife, he was already quite poverty-stricken. At the time of separation, he became very sorry. King Puranjana was anxiously thinking, "Alas, my wife is encumbered by so many children. When I pass from this body, how will she be able to maintain them, these family members? Alas, she will be greatly harassed by the new kingdom." King Puranjana then began to think of his past dealings with his wife. He recalled that his wife would not take him to dinner until he had finished his, that she would not take her bath until he had finished his, and that she was always very much attached to him. So much so that if he would sometimes become angry and chastise her, she would simply remain silent and tolerate his misbehavior. King Puranjana continued, thinking how when he was in a state of bewilderment, his wife would give him good counsel, and how she would become aggrieved when he was away from home. Although she was the mother of so many sons and heroes, the king still feared that she would not be able to maintain the responsibility of household affairs. King Puranjana continued worrying, "After I pass from this world, how will my sons and daughters, who are now fully dependent on me, live and continue their lives? Their position will be similar to that of the passengers aboard a ship wrecked in the midst of the ocean." Although King Puranjana should not have lamented over the fate of his wife and children, he nonetheless did so due to his miserly intelligence. In the meantime, Yavana Raj, whose name was Fear itself, immediately drew near to arrest him. When the Yavanas were taking King Puranjana away to their place, binding him like an animal, The king's followers became greatly aggrieved. While they lamented, they were forced to go along with him. The serpent, who had already been arrested by the soldiers of Yavanaraj and was out of the city, began to follow his master along with the others. As soon as they all left the city, it was immediately dismantled and smashed to dust. When King Puranjana was still being dragged with great force by the powerful Yavana, out of his gross ignorance he could not remember his friend and well-wisher, the super soul. That most unkind king, Puranjana, had killed many animals in various sacrifices. Now, taking advantage of this opportunity, all these animals began to pierce him with their horns. It was as though he were the dark region of material life, bereft of remembrance for many, many years. King Puranjana gave up his body while remembering his wife, and consequently, in the next life, he became a very beautiful and well-situated woman. He took his next birth as the daughter of King Vidarbhan in the very house of the king. It was fixed that Vaidarbhi, daughter of King Vidarbha, was to be married to a powerful man, Malayadeva, inhabitant of the Pandu country. After conquering other princes, he married the daughter of King Vidarbha. King Malayadwaja fathered one daughter who had very black eyes, and also he had 7 sons who later became ruler of the tract of land known as Dravida. Thus there were 7 kings in that land. By King Prachinabarshad, the son of Malayadwaja, gave birth to many thousands and thousands of sons, and all of these have been protecting the entire world up to the end of one Manu's life. End of one Manu's lifespan, and even afterward. The great sage named Agastya married the firstborn daughter of Malayadwaja, a vowed devotee of Lord Krishna. From her, one son was born, whose name was Dridachyuta, and from him another son was born, whose name was Iti Mahavaha. After this, the great saintly king Malayadwaja divided his entire kingdom among his sons. Then, in order to worship Lord Krishna with full attention, he went to a solitary place known as Kulachala. Just as the moonshine follows the moon at night, immediately after King Malayadwaj departed for Kaluchala, his devoted wife, whose eyes were very enchanting, followed him, giving up all homely happiness despite the family and children. In the province of Kulachala, there were rivers named Chandravasi, Tamraparni, and Vatodaka. King Malayadwaja used to go to these pious rivers regularly and take his bath there. Thus he purified himself externally and internally. He took his bath and ate bulbs, seeds, leaves, flowers, roots, fruit, and grasses, and drank water. In this way he underwent severe austerities. Eventually he became very skinny. Through austerity, King Malayadwaj in the body and mind gradually became equal to the dualities of cold and heat, happiness and distress, wind and rain, hunger and thirst, the pleasant and unpleasant. In this way, he conquered all relativities. By worshipping, executing austerities, and following the regulative principles, King Malayadhwaj conquered his senses, his life, and his consciousness. Thus he fixed everything on the central point of the Supreme Brahman, Krishna. In this way, he stayed immovable in one place for 100 years by the calculations of the demigods. After this time, he developed pure devotional attraction for Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and remained fixed in that position. King Malayadhwaj attained perfect knowledge by being able to distinguish the supersoul from the individual soul. The individual soul is localized, whereas the supersoul is all-pervasive. He became perfect in knowledge that the material body is not the soul, but that the soul is the witness of the material body. In this way, King Malayadhwaj attained perfect knowledge because, in his pure state, he was directly instructed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By means of such enlightening transcendental knowledge, he could understand everything by the angles of vision. King Malayadhwaj could thus observe that the supersoul was sitting by his side, and that he, as the individual soul, was sitting by the side of the supersoul. Since both were together, there was no need for separate interests. Thus he ceased from such activities. The daughter of King Vidarbha accepted her husband all in all as the supreme. She gave up all sensual enjoyment and complete renunciation. Followed the principles of her husband, who was so advanced. Thus she remained engaged in his service. The daughter of King Vidarbha wore old garments, and she was lean and thin because of her vows of austerity. Since she did not arrange her hair, it became entangled and twisted in locks. Although she remained always near her husband, she was as silent and unagitated as the flame of an undisturbed fire. The daughter of King Vidarbha continued as usual to serve her husband, who was seated in a steady posture, until she could ascertain that he had passed away from the body. While she was serving her husband by massaging his legs, she could feel that his feet were no longer warm and cold, thus understand that he had already passed from the body. She felt great anxiety upon being left alone, bereft of her husband's company. She felt exactly as the deer feels upon being separated from its mate. Being now alone in the window and a widow in that forest, the daughter of Vidarbha began to lament, incessantly shedding tears, which soaked her breasts, and crying very loudly, "O best of kings, please get up, get up. Just see this world surrounded by water and infested with rogues and so-called kings. This world is very much afraid, and it is your duty to protect her." That most obedient wife thus O best of kings, please get up. Get up! Just see the world surrounded by water, infested by rogues and so-called kings. This world is very much afraid, and it is your duty to protect her. That most obedient wife thus fell down at the feet of her dead husband and began to cry pitifully in that solitary forest. Thus the tears rolled down from her eyes. She then prepared a blazing fire with firewood and placed the dead body of her husband upon it. When this was finished, she lamented severely and prepared herself to perish in the fire with her husband. My dear king, one Brahmana, who was an old friend of King Purandjana, came to that place and began to pacify the queen with sweet words. The Brahmana inquired as follows: "Who are you? Whose wife or daughter are you? Who is that man lying there? It appears that you are lamenting for this body, this dead body. Don't you recognize me? I am your eternal friend. You may remember that many times in the past you have consulted me." The Brahmana continued, "My dear friend, even though you cannot immediately recognize me, can't you remember that in The Brahmana continued, "My dear friend, even though you cannot immediately recognize me, can't you remember that in the past you had a very intimate friend? Unfortunately, you gave up my company and accepted a position as an enjoyer of this material world. My dear gentle friend, both you and I are exactly like two swans. We live together in the same heart, which is just like the Manasa lake. Although we have been living together for many thousands of years, we are still far away from our original home. My dear friend, you are now my very same friend. Since you have left me, you have become more and more materialistic. And not seeing me, you have been traveling in different forms throughout this material world, which was created by some woman. In that city, the material body, there are 5 gardens, 9 gates, 1 protector, 3 apartments, 6 families, 5 stores, 5 material elements, and 1 woman who is lord of the house. My dear friend, in the 5 gardens are the 5 objects of sense enjoyment, and the protector is the life air, which passes through the 9 gates. The 3 apartments are the chief ingredients: fire, water, and earth. These 6 families are the aggregate total of the mind and the 5 senses. The 5 stores are the 5 working sensing organs. They transact their business through the combined force of the 5 elements, which are eternal. Behind all this activity is the soul. The soul is the person and the enjoyer in reality. However, because he is now hidden within the city of the body, he is devoid of knowledge. My dear friend, when you enter such a body along with the women of material desires, you become overly absorbed in sense enjoyment. Because of this, you have forgotten your spiritual life. Due to your material conceptions, you are placed in various miserable conditions. Actually, you are not the daughter of Vidarbha, nor is this man, Malaya Dwaj, your well-wishing husband, nor were you the actual husband of Purandjani. You were simply captivated in this body of 9 gates. Sometimes you think yourself a man, sometimes a chaste woman, and sometimes a neutral eunuch. This is all because of the body, which is created by the illusory energy. This illusory energy is my potency, and actually both of us, you and I, are the pure spiritual identities. Now just try to understand this. I am trying to explain our factual position. My dear friend, I, the supersoul, and you, the individual soul, are not different in quality, for we are both spiritual. In fact, my dear friend, you are qualitatively not different from me in your constitutional position. Just try to consider this subject. Those who are actually advanced scholars who are in knowledge do not find any qualitative difference between you and me. As a person sees the reflection of his body in a mirror to be one with himself and not different, whereas others actually see 2 bodies, So in our material condition, in which the living being is affected and yet not affected, there is a difference between God and the living entity. In this way, both swans live together in the heart. When one swan is instructed by the other, he is situated in his constitutional position. This means he regains his original Krishna consciousness, which was lost because of his material attraction. My dear King Prachinabhati, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the cause of all causes, is celebrated to be known indirectly. Thus, I have described the story of Puranjana to you. Actually, it is an instruction for self-realization. Thus, in chapter 28, Puranjana becomes a woman in the next life. Chapter 29 talks between Narada and King Prachinabhati. King Prachinabhati replied, My dear Lord, we could not appreciate completely the purport of your allegorical stories of King Puranjana. Actually, those who are perfect in spiritual knowledge can understand, but for us who are overly attached to fruitive activities, to realize the purpose of your story is very difficult. The great sage Narada Muni continued, You must understand that Puranjana, the living entity, transmigrates according to his own work into different types of bodies, which may be one-legged, two-legged, three-legged, four-legged, many-legged, or simply legless. Transmigration into these various types of bodies, the living entity as the so-called enjoyer is known as Puranjana. The person I have described as unknown is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the master and eternal friend of the living entity. Since the living entities cannot realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead by material names, activities, or qualities, he remains everlastingly unknown to the conditioned soul. When the living entity wants to enjoy the modes of material nature in their totality, he prefers, out of many bodily forms, to accept that body which has 9 gates, 2 hands, and 2 legs. Thus he prefers to become a human being or a demigod. The great sage Narada continued, The word pramada mentioned in this regard refers to material intelligence or ignorance. It is to be understood as such. When one takes shelter of this kind of intelligence, he identifies himself with the material body. Influenced by the material consciousness of I and mine, he begins to enjoy and suffer through his senses. Thus, the living entity is entrapped. The 5 working senses, the 5 senses that acquire knowledge, are all male friends of Puranjani. The living entity is assisted by these senses in acquiring knowledge and engaging in activity. The engagements of the senses are known as the girlfriends, and the serpent, which is described as having 5 heads, is the life air acting within the 5 circulatory processes. The 11th attendant, who is the commander of the others, is known as the mind. He is the leader of the senses both in the acquisition of knowledge and in the performance of work. The Panchala kingdom is that atmosphere in which the 5 sense objects are enjoyed. Within that Panchala kingdom is the city of the body, which has 9 gates. The eyes, nostrils, and ears, and pairs of gates situated in one place. The mouth, genital, and rectum are also different gates. Being placed into a body having these 9 gates, the living entity acts externally in the material world and enjoys sense objects like form and taste. 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, and a mouth, altogether 5, are situated in the front. The right ear is accepted as the southern gate, and the left ear is the northern gate. The two holes or gates situated in the west are known as the rectum and genital. The two gates named Kadyota and Avirmukhi, which have been spoken of, are the two eyes side by side in one place. The town named Vibrajita should be understood as form. In this way, the two eyes are always engaged in seeing different kinds of forms. The two doors named Nalini and Nalini should be known as the two nostrils, and the city named Saurabha represents aroma. The companion spoken of as Avadut is the sense of smell. The door called Mukhya is the mouth, and Vipana is the faculty of speech. Rasagya is the sense of taste. The city called Apana represents engagement of the tongue in speech, and Bahudana is the variety of foodstuffs. The right ear is called the gate of Pitruhu, and the left ear is called the gate of Devahu. Narada Muni continued, the city spoken of as Dakshina Panchala represents the scriptures meant for directing pravritti, the process of sense enjoyment in fruitive activities. The other city, named Uttara Panchala, represents the scriptures meant for decreasing fruitive activities and increasing knowledge. The living entity receives different kinds of knowledge by means of two ears, and some living entities are promoted to Pitraloka and some to Devaloka. All this is made possible by the two ears. The city called Gramaka, which is approached through the lower gate of Asuri, the genital, is meant for sex, which is very pleasing to common men who are simply fools and rascals. The faculty of procreation is called Dhurmada, and the rectum is called Niriti. When it is said that Puranjana goes to Vaishasa, it is meant that he goes to hell. He is accompanied by Lubdaka, which is the working sense in the rectum. Formerly, I have spoken of two blind associates. These associates should be understood to be the hands and the legs. Being helped by the hands and legs, the living entity performs all kinds of work and moves hither and thither. The word Antahapura refers to the heart. The word Vishuchina, meaning going everywhere, indicates the mind. Within the mind, the living entity enjoys the effects of the modes of material nature. These effects sometimes cause illusion, sometimes satisfaction, and sometimes jubilation. Formerly, it was explained that the queen is one's intelligence. While one is awake or asleep, that intelligence creates different situations. Being influenced by contaminated intelligence, the living entity envisions something and simply imitates the actions and reactions of his intelligence. Narada Muni continued, what I referred to as the chariot was in actuality the body. The senses are the horses that pull the chariot. As time passes, year after year, these horses run without obstruction, but in fact they make no progress. Pious and impious activities are the two wheels of the chariot. The three modes of material nature are the chariot's flags. The 5 types of life air constitute the living entity's bondage, and the mind is considered to be the rope. Intelligence is the chariot driver, the heart is the sitting place in the chariot, and the dualities of life, such as pleasure and pain, are the nodding place. The 7 elements are the coverings of the chariot, and the working senses are the 5 external processes. The 11 senses are the soldiers. Being engrossed in sense enjoyment, the living entity, seated on the chariot, hankers after fulfillment of his false desires and runs after sense enjoyment life after life. What was previously explained as Chandavega, powerful time, is covered by days and nights, named Gandharvas and Gandharvis. The body's lifespan is gradually reduced by the passage of days and nights, which number 360. What was described as Kalakanya should be understood as old age. No one wants to accept old age, but Yavaneshvara, Yavanaraj, who is death, accepts Jara, old age, as his sister. The followers of Yavaneshvara, Yamaraj, are called the soldiers of death, and they are known as the various types of disturbances that pertain to the body and mind. Prajvara represents the two types of fever, extreme heat and extreme cold, typhoid and pneumonia. The living entity lying down within the body is disturbed by many tribulations pertaining to providence, to other living entities, and to his own body and mind. Despite all the kinds of tribulations, the living entity, subjected to the necessities of the body, mind, and senses, and suffering from various types of disease, is carried away by many plans due to his lust to enjoy the world. Although transcendental to this material existence, the living entity, out of ignorance, accepts all these material miseries under the pretext of false egoism, I and mine. In this way, he lives for 100 years within this body. The living entity, by nature, has minute independence to choose his own good and bad fortune. But when he forgets his Supreme Master, the personality of Godhead, he gives himself up to the modes of material nature. Being influenced by the modes of material nature, he identifies himself with the body, and for the interest of the body becomes attached to various activities. Sometimes he is under the influence of the mode of ignorance, sometimes the mode of passion, and sometimes the mode of goodness. The living entity thus gets different types of bodies under the modes of material nature. Those who are situated in the mode of goodness act piously according to Vedic injunctions. Thus, they are elevated to the higher planetary systems, where the demigods live. Those who are influenced by the mode of passion engage in various types of productive activities in the planetary systems where human beings live. Similarly, those influenced by the mode of darkness are subjected to various types of misery and live in the animal kingdom. Covered by the mode of ignorance in material nature, the living entity is sometimes a male, sometimes a female, sometimes a eunuch, sometimes a human being, sometimes a demigod, sometimes a bird, an animal, and so on. In this way, he is wandering within the material universe. His acceptance of different types of bodies is brought about by his activities under the influence of the modes of nature. The living entity is exactly like a dog, who, overcome with hunger, goes from door to door for some food. According to his destiny, he sometimes receives punishment and is driven out, and at other times receives a little food to eat. Similarly, the living entity, being influenced by so many desires, wanders in different species of life, according to destiny. Sometimes he is high, and sometimes he is low. Sometimes he goes to the heavenly planets, sometimes to hell, sometimes to the middle planets, and so on. The living entities are trying to counteract different miserable conditions pertaining to providence. Other living entities, or the body and mind, Still, they must remain conditioned by the laws of nature, despite all attempts to counter these laws. A man may carry a burden on his head, and when he feels it to be too heavy, he sometimes gives relief to his head by putting the burden on his shoulder. In this way, he tries to relieve himself of the burden. However, whatever process he devises to counteract the burden does nothing more than put the same burden from one place to another. Narada continued, O you who are free from all sinful activity, no one can counteract the effects of fruitive activity simply by manufacturing a different activity devoid of Krishna consciousness. All such activity is due to our ignorance. When we have a troublesome dream, we cannot relieve it with a troublesome hallucination. One can counteract a dream only by awaking. Similarly, our material existence is due to our ignorance and illusion. Unless we awaken to Krishna consciousness, we cannot be relieved of such dreams. For the ultimate solution to all problems, we must awaken to Krishna consciousness. Sometimes we suffer because we see a tiger in a dream or a snake in a vision, but actually there is neither a tiger nor a snake. Thus we create some situation in a subtle form and suffer the consequences. These sufferings cannot be mitigated unless we are awakened from our dream. The real interest of the living entity is to get out of the nations that causes him to endure repeated birth and death. The only remedy is to surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead through his representative. Unless one renders devotional service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva, one cannot possibly become completely detached from this material world, nor can he possibly manifest real knowledge. O best of kings, one who is fearful, who is always hearing the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is always engaged in the culture of Krishna consciousness and in hearing of the Lord's activities, very soon becomes eligible to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face. My dear king, in the place where pure devotees live, following the rules and regulations, and thus purely conscious and engaged with great eagerness in hearing and chanting the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and that place, if one gets a chance to hear their constant flow of nectar, which is exactly like the waves of a river, one will forget the necessities of life, namely hunger and thirst, and become immune to all kinds of fears, lamentations, and illusions. Because the conditioned soul is always disturbed by the bodily necessities such as hunger and thirst, he has very little time to cultivate attachment to hearing the nectarian words of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The most powerful Lord Brahma, the father of all progenitors, Lord Shiva, Manu, Daksha, and other rulers of humankind, the four saintly class brahmacharis headed by Sanaka and Sanatana, the great sage Marichi, Atri, Angira, Pulastya, Pulaha, Kretu, Brigu, and Vasishta, and my humble self, Narada, are all stalwart brahmanas who can speak authoritatively on Vedic literature. We are very powerful because of austerities, meditation, and education. Nonetheless, even after inquiring about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whom we always see, we do not perfectly know about him. Despite the cultivation of Vedic knowledge, which is unlimited, and the worship of different demigods by the symptoms of Vedic mantras, demigod worship does not help one to understand the supreme powerful personality of Godhead. When a person is fully engaged in devotional service, he is favored by the Lord, who bestows his causeless mercy. At such a time, the awakened devotee gives up all material activities and ritualistic performances mentioned in the Vedas. My dear King Barhishman, you should never out of ignorance take to the Vedic rituals or fruitive activities which may be pleasing to hear about or which may appear to be the goal of self-interest. You should never take to these to be the ultimate goal of life. Those who are less intelligent accept the Vedic ritualistic ceremonies as the all in all. They do not know that the purpose of the Vedas is to understand one's own home, where the Supreme Personality of Godhead lives. Not being interested in their real home, they are illusioned and search after other homes. My dear King, the entire world is covered with sharp points of kusha grass, and on the strength of this you have become proud because you have killed various types of animals in sacrifice. Because of your foolishness, you do not know that devotional service is the only way one can please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You cannot understand this fact. Your only activities should be those that can please the Personality of Godhead. Our education should be such that we can become elevated to Krishna consciousness. Sri Hari, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the Supersoul and guide of all living entities who have accepted material bodies within this world. He is the supreme controller of all material activities in the material nature. He is also our best friend, and everyone should take shelter of his lotus feet. In doing so, one's life will be auspicious. One who is engaged in devotional service has not the least fear in material existence. This is because the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the Supersoul and friend of everyone. One who knows this secret is actually educated, and one thus educated can become the spiritual master of the world. One who is an actual bona fide spiritual master, representative of Krishna, is not different from Krishna. The great saint Narada continued, O great personality, I have replied properly about all that you have asked me. Now hear another narration that is accepted by saintly persons and is very confidential. My dear king, please search out that deer who is engaged in eating grass in the very nice flower garden along with his wife. That deer is very much attached to his business, and he is enjoying the sweet singing of the bumblebees in his garden. Just try to understand his position. He is unaware that before him is a tiger which is accustomed to living at the cost of another's flesh. Behind the deer is a hunter who is threatening to pierce him with sharp arrows. Thus the deer's death is imminent. My dear king, woman who is very attractive in the beginning, but in the end very disturbing, is exactly like the flower, which is attractive in the beginning and detestable at the end. With women, the living entity is entangled with lusty desires, and he enjoys sex just as one enjoys the aroma of a flower. He thus enjoys a life of sense gratification from his tongue to his genitals, and in this way the living entity considers himself very happy in family life. United with his wife, he always remains absorbed in such thoughts. He feels great pleasure in hearing the talks of his wife and children, which are like sweet humming of the bumblebees that collect honey from the flower to flower. He forgets that before him is time, which is taking away his lifespan with the passing of day and night. He does not see the gradual diminishing of his life, nor does he care about the superintendent of death. who is trying to kill him from behind. Just try to understand this. You are in a precarious position and are threatened from all sides. My dear king, just try to understand the allegorical position of the deer. Be fully cautious of yourself, and give up the pleasure of hearing about promotion to heavenly planets by fruitive activity. Give up household life, which is full of sex, as well as stories about such things, and take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead through the mercy of the liberated souls. In this way, please give up your attraction for material existence. The king replied, My dear Brahmana, whatever you have said I have heard with great attention, and considering all of it, I have come to the conclusion that the acharyas, teachers who engage me in fruitive activity, do not know this confidential knowledge. If they were aware of it, why did they not explain it to me? My dear Brahmana, these are contradictions between your instructions and those of my spiritual teachers who engage me in fruitive activities. I now can understand the distinction between devotional service, knowledge, and renunciation. I had some doubts about them, but you have now very kindly dissipated all these doubts, as now I can now understand how even the great sages are bewildered by the real purpose of life. Of course, there is no question of sense gratification. The results of whatever a living entity does in this life are enjoyed in the next life. The expert knowers of the Vedic conclusions say that one enjoys or suffers the results of his past activities. But practically, it is seen that the body that performed the work in the last birth is already lost. So how is it possible to enjoy or suffer the reactions of that work in a different body? The great sage Narada continued, The living entity acts in a gross body in this life. This body is forced to act by the subtle body, composed of mind, intelligence, and ego. After the gross body is lost, the subtle body is still there to enjoy or suffer. Thus there is no change. The living entity, while dreaming, gives up the actual living body. Through the activities of his mind and intelligence, he acts in another body, either as a god or a dog. After giving up this gross body, the living entity enters either an animal body or a demigod's body, or on this planet or on another planet. Thus he enjoys the results of the actions of his past life. The living entity labors under the bodily conception of I am this, I am that, my duty is this, and therefore I shall do it. These are all mental impressions, and all these activities are temporary. Nonetheless, by the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the living entity gets a chance to execute all these concoctions. Thus, he gets another body. One can understand the mental or conscious position of a living entity by the activities of two kinds of senses, the knowledge-acquiring senses and the executive senses. Similarly, by mental condition or consciousness of a person, one can understand his position in the previous life. Sometimes we suddenly experience something that was never experienced in the present body by sight or hearing. Sometimes we see such things suddenly in dreams. Therefore, my dear king, the living entity who has a subtle mental covering develops all kinds of thoughts and images because of his previous body. Take this from me as certain. There is no possibility of concocting anything mentally without having perceived it in the previous body. O king, all good fortunes unto you. The mind is the cause of the living entity's attaining of a certain type of body in accordance with his association with material nature. According to one's mental composition, one can understand that the living entity was in his past life as well as what kind of body he will have in the future. Thus the mind indicates the past and future bodies. Sometimes in a dream, we see something never experienced or heard of in this life, but all these incidents have been experienced at different times, in different places, and in different conditions. The mind of the living entity continues to exist in various gross bodies, and according to one's desires for sense gratification, the mind records different thoughts. In the mind, these appear together in different combinations. Therefore, these images sometimes appear as things never seen or never heard before. Krishna consciousness means constantly associating with the Supreme Personality of Godhead in such a mental state that the devotees can observe the cosmic manifestation exactly as the Supreme Personality of Godhead does. Such observation is not always possible, but it becomes manifest exactly like the dark planet known as Rahu, which is observed in the presence of the full moon. As long as there exists the subtle material body composed of intelligence, mind, senses, sense objects, and the reactions of the material qualities, the consciousness of false identification and its relative objective, the gross body, exist as well. When a living entity is in deep sleep, when he faints, when there is some great shock on account of severe loss at the time of death, or when the body temperature is very high, the movement of the life air is arrested. At that time, the living entity loses knowledge of identifying with the body, with the self. When one is a youth, all the 10 senses and the mind are completely visible. However, in the mother's womb or in the boyhood state, the sense organs and the mind remain covered, just as the full moon is covered by the darkness of the dark moon night. When a living entity dreams, the sense objects are not actually present. However, because one has associated with the sense objects, they become manifest. Similarly, the living entity with undeveloped senses does not cease to exist materially, even though he may not be exactly in contact with the sense objects. These 5 sense objects, the 5 sense organs, the 5 knowledge-acquiring senses, and the mind are the 16 material expansions. These combine with the living entity and are influenced by the 3 modes of material nature. Thus the existence of the conditioned soul is understood. By virtue of the process of the subtle body, the living entity develops and gives up gross bodies. This is known as the transmigration of the soul. Thus the soul becomes subjected to different types of so-called enjoyment, lamentation, fear, happiness, and unhappiness. The caterpillar transports itself from one leaf to another by capturing one leaf before giving up the other. Similarly, according to his previous work, the living entity must capture another body before giving up the one he has. This is because the mind is the reservoir of all kinds of desires. As long as we desire to enjoy sense gratification, we create material activities. When the living entity acts in the material field, he enjoys the senses while enjoying the senses, he creates another series of material activities. In this way, the living entity becomes entrapped as a conditioned soul. You should always know that this cosmic manifestation is created, maintained, and annihilated by the will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Consequently, everything with this cosmic manifestation is under the control of the Lord. To be enlightened by this perfect knowledge, one should always engage himself in the devotional service of the Lord. The great sage Maitreya continued, "The supreme devotee And the great Saint Narada thus explained to King Prachinabhari the constitutional position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entity. After giving an invitation to the king, Narada Muni left to return to Siddhaloka. In the presence of his ministers, the saintly king Prachinabhari left orders for his sons to protect the citizens. Then he left home and went off to undergo austerities in a holy place known as Kapilashram. Having undergone austerities and penances at Kapilashram, King Prachinabhari attained full liberation from all material designations. He constantly engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord and attained a spiritual position qualitatively equal to that of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. My dear Vidura, one who hears this narration concerning the understanding of the living entity's spiritual existence as described by the great sage Narada, or who relates it to others, will be liberated from the bodily conception of life. This narration, spoken by the great sage Narada, is full of the transcendental fame of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Consequently, this narration, when described, certainly sanctifies this material world. It purifies the heart of the living entity and helps him attain his spiritual identity. One who relates this transcendental narration will be liberated from all material bondage and will no longer have to wander within this material world. The allegory of King Puranjana described herein, according to authority, was heard by me from my spiritual master, and it is full of spiritual knowledge. One who can understand the purpose of this allegory, he will certainly be relieved from the bodily conception and will certainly understand life after death. Although one may not understand what transmigration of the soul actually is, one can fully understand it by studying this narration. A desire to maintain body, wife, and children is also observed in animal society. The animals have full intelligence to manage such affairs. If a human being is simply advanced in this respect, what is the difference between him and an animal? One should be very careful to understand that this human life is attained after many, many births in the evolutionary process. A learned man who gives up the bodily conception of life, both gross and subtle, will, by the enlightenment of spiritual knowledge, become a prominent individual spirit soul, as the Supreme Lord is also. If a living entity is developed in Krishna consciousness and is merciful to others, and if spiritual knowledge of self-realization is perfect, he will immediately attain liberation from the bondage of material existence. Everything happening within time, which consists of past, present, and future, is merely a dream. That is the secret understanding in all Vedic literature. Thus end chapter 29, talks between Narada and King Prachinabhari of Canto 4. Chapter 30, the activities of the Prachetas. Vidura inquired from Maitreya, O Brahmana, you formerly spoke about the sons of Prachinabhari and informed me that they satisfied the Supreme Personality of Godhead by chanting a song composed by Lord Shiva. What did they achieve in this way? My dear Bharaspatya, what did the son of the king Bharishat, known as the Prachetas, obtain after meeting Lord Shiva, who is very dear to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the bestower of liberation? Certainly they were transferred to the spiritual world, but apart from that, what did they obtain within this material world, either in this life or in the other lives? The great sage Maitreya said, the sons of King Prachinabhari, known as the Prachetas, underwent severe austerities within the seawater to carry out the order of their father. By chanting and repeating the mantras given by Lord Shiva, they were able to satisfy Lord Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. At the end of 10,000 years of severe austerities performed by the Prachetas, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to reward their austerities, appeared before them in his very pleasing form. This appealed to the Prachetas and satisfied the labor of their austerities. The Personality of Godhead, appearing on the shoulder of Garuda, seemed like a cloud resting on the summit of the mountain town as Meru. The transcendental body of the Personality of Godhead was covered by attractive yellow garments, and his neck was decorated with the jewel known as Kashtubhamani. The bodily effulgence of the Lord dissipated all the darkness of the universe. The Lord's face was very beautiful, and his head was decorated with a shining helmet and golden ornaments. The helmet was dazzling and was very beautiful, situated on his head. The Lord had 8 arms, which each held a particular weapon. The Lord was surrounded by demigods, great sages, and other associates. These were all engaged in the service. Garuda appeared to be an inhabitant on the planet known as the Kinraloka. Around his neck of the Personality of Godhead hung a flower garland that reached his knees. His 8 stout and elongated arms were decorated with that garland, which challenged the beauty of the goddess of fortune. With a merciful glance and a voice like thunder, the Lord addressed the sons of King Prachinabarishad, who were very much surrendered on to him. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "My dear sons, the king and of the king, I am very much pleased by the friendly relationships among you. All of you are engaged in one occupation, devotional service. I am so pleased with your mutual friendship that I wish you all good fortune. Now you may ask a benediction of me." The Lord continued, "Those who remembered you every evening of every day will become very friendly with their brothers and with all other living entities. Those who will offer me the prayers composed by Lord Shiva both in the morning and in the evening will be given benedictions by me. In this way they can both fulfill their desires and attain good intelligence. Because you have with pleasure accepted within your hearts the order of the Father and have executed those orders very faithfully, your attractive qualities will be celebrated all over the world. You will have a nice son who will be in no way inferior to Lord Brahma. Consequently, he will be very famous all over the universe. And the sons and the grandsons generated by him will fulfill the 3 worlds. O sons of King Prachinabarishad, the heavenly society girl named Pramalocha kept the lotus-eyed daughter of Kandu in the care of the forest trees. Then she went back to the heavenly planet. This daughter was born by the coupling of the Apsara named Pramalocha with the sage Kandu. Thereafter, the child, who was left to the care of the trees, began to cry in hunger. At that time, the king of the forest, namely, the king of the moon planet, out of compassion, placed his finger, which poured forth nectar, within the child's mouth. Thus the child was raised by the mercy of the king of the moon. Since all of you were very much obedient to my orders, I asked you to immediately marry that girl, who is so well qualified with beauty and good qualities. According to the order your father create progeny through her. Your brothers are all of the same nature, being devotees and obedient sons of your father. Similarly, that girl is also of the same type and is dedicated to all of you. Thus both the girl and you, the sons of Prachinabarishad, are on the same platform, being united on the common principle. The Lord then blessed all the Prachetas, saying, My dear princes, by my mercy you can enjoy all the facilities of this world as well as the heavenly world. Indeed, you can enjoy all of them without hindrance and with full strength for 1,000,000 celestial years. Thereafter you will develop unadulterated devotional service unto me and be freed from all material contamination. At that time, being completely unattached to material enjoyment in the so-called heavenly planets as well as in hellish planets, you will return home, back to Godhead. Those who are engaged in auspicious activities in devotional service certainly understand that the ultimate enjoyer or beneficiary of all activities is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, when one acts, he offers the results to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and passes life always engaged in the topics of the Lord. Even though such a person may be participating in family life, he is not affected by the results of his actions. Always engaging in the activities of devotional service, devotees feel ever increasingly fresh and new in all their activities. The all-knower, the supersoul within the heart of the devotees makes everything increasingly fresh. This is known as the Brahman position by the advocates of the absolute truth. In such a liberated stage, Brahmabhuta, one is never bewildered, nor does one lament or become unnecessarily jubilant. This is due to the Brahman Bhuta situation. The great sage Maitreya said, after the personality of God had spoke thus, the Prachetas began to offer him prayers. The Lord is the bestower of all such life and is the supreme benefactor. He is also the supreme friend who takes away all miserable conditions experienced by a devotee. In a faltering voice, due to ecstasy, the Prachetas began to offer prayers. They were purified by the presence of the Lord, who was before them face to face. The Prachetas spoke as follows: Dear Lord, you relieve all kinds of material distress. Your magnanimous transcendental qualities and holy name are all auspicious. This conclusion is already settled. So you can go faster than the speed of mind and words. You cannot be perceived by material senses. We therefore offer you respectful obeisances again and again. Dear Lord, we beg to offer our obeisances unto you. When the mind is fixed upon you, the world of duality, although a place for material enjoyment, appears meaningless. Your transcendental form is full of transcendental bliss. We therefore offer our respects unto you. Your appearance as Lord Brahma, Lord Vishnu, and Lord Shiva are meant for the purpose of creating, maintaining, and annihilating this cosmic manifestation. Dear Lord, we offer our respectful obeisances unto you because your existence is completely independent of all material influences. Your lordship always takes away the devotee's miserable conditions. For your brain plans how to do so. You live everywhere as the Parama Atma. Therefore, you are known as Vasudev, and also accept Vasudev as your father, and you are celebrated by the name Krishna. You are so kind that you always increase the influence of all kinds of devotees. Dear Lord, we offer our respectful obeisances unto you, because from your abdomen sprouts the lotus flower, the origin of all living entities are always decorated with the lotus garland, and your feet resemble the lotus flower with all its fragrance. Your eyes are also like the petals of a lotus flower. Therefore, we always offer our respectful obeisances unto you. Dear Lord, the garment you have put on is yellowish in color, like the saffron of your lotus flower, but is not made of anything material. Since you live in everyone's heart, you are the direct witness of all activities of living entities. We offer our respectful obeisances unto you again and again. Dear Lord, we conditioned souls are always covered by ignorance in the bodily conception of life. We therefore always prefer the miserable conditions of material existence. To deliver us from these miserable conditions, you have advented yourself in this way in transcendental form. This is evidence of your unlimited causeless mercy upon those of us who are suffering in this way. What then to speak of the devotees whom you are always so favorably disposed? Dear Lord, you are the killer of all inauspicious things. You are compassionate upon your poor devotees through the expansion of your Archa Vigraha. You should certainly think of us as your eternal servants. When the Lord, out of his natural compassion, thinks of his devotee, by that process only are all desires of the neophyte devotee fulfilled. The Lord is situated in every living entity's heart, although the living entity may be very insignificant. The Lord knows everything about the living entity, including his desires, although we are very insignificant. Why should the Lord not know our desires? O Lord of the universe, you are the actual teacher of the science of devotional service. We are satisfied that your Lordship is the ultimate goal of our lives, and we pray that you will be satisfied with us. That is our benediction. We do not desire anything other than your full satisfaction. Dear Lord, we shall therefore pray for your benediction, because you are the supreme, beyond all transcendence, and because there is no end to your opulence. Consequently, you are celebrated by the name Ananta. Dear Lord, when the bee approaches the celestial tree called the Parijata, it certainly does not leave the tree, because there is no need for such action. Similarly, when we have approached your lotus feet and taken shelter of them, what further benediction may we ask from you? Dear Lord, as long as we have to remain within this material world due to our material contamination and wander from one type of body to another and from one planet to another, we pray that we may associate with those who are engaged in discussing your pastimes. We pray for this benediction life after life, in different bodily forms and on different planets. Even a moment's association with a pure devotee cannot be compared to being transferred to heavenly planets or even merging into the Brahman effulgent in complete liberation. For living entities who are destined to give up the body and die, association with pure devotees is the highest benediction. Whenever pure topics of the transcendental world are discussed, the members of the audience forget all kinds of material hankerings, at least for the time being. Not only that, but they are no longer envious of one another, nor do they suffer from anxiety or fear. The Supreme Lord Narayana is present among devotees who are engaged in hearing and chanting the holy name of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Lord Narayana is the ultimate goal of sannyasis, those in the renounced order of life, and Narayana is worshipped through this Sankirtan movement by those who are liberated from material contamination. Indeed, they recite the holy name again and again. Dear Lord, your personal associates, devotees, wander all over the world to purify even the holy places of pilgrimage. Is not such activity pleasing to those who are actually afraid of material existence? Dear Lord, by virtue of a moment's association with Lord Shiva, who is very dear to you and who is your most intimate friend, We were fortunate to attain you. You are the most expert physician, capable of treating the incurable disease of material existence. On account of great fortune, we have been able to take shelter at your lotus feet. Dear Lord, we have studied the Vedas, accepted a spiritual master, and offered respect to brahmanas, advanced devotees, and aged personalities who are spiritually very advanced. We have offered our respects to them, and we have not been envious of any brother, friend, or anyone else. We have also undergone severe austerities within the water and have not taken food for a long time. All these spiritual assets of ours are simply offered for your satisfaction. We pray for this benediction only and nothing more. Dear Lord, even great yogis and mystics who are very much advanced by virtue of austerities and knowledge, and who have completely situated themselves in pure existence, as well as great personalities like Manu, Lord Brahma, and Lord Shiva, cannot fully understand your glories and potencies. Nonetheless, they have offered their prayers according to their own capacities. In this same way, we, although much lower than these personalities, also offer our prayers according to our own capability. Dear Lord, you have no enemies or friends, therefore you are equal to everyone. You cannot be contaminated by sinful activities, and your transcendental form is always beyond the material creation. You are the Supreme Personality of Godhead because you remain everywhere within all existence. You are consequently known as Vasudev, but we offer our respectful obeisances. The great sage Maitreya continued, My dear Vidura, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the protector of surrendered souls, being thus addressed by the Prachetas and worshipped by them, replied, May whatever you have prayed for be fulfilled. After saying this, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose prowess is never defeated, left. The Prachetas were unwilling to be separated from him because they had not seen him to their full satisfaction. Thereafter all the Prachetas emerged from the waters of the sea. They then saw that all the trees on the land had grown very tall, as if to obstruct the path to the heavenly planets. These trees had covered the entire surface of the world. At this time the Prachetas became very angry. My dear king, at the time of devastation, Lord Shiva admits fire and air from the mouth out of anger. To make the surface of the earth completely treeless, the Prachetas also admitted fire and air from their mouths. After seeing that all the trees on the surface of the earth were being turned to ashes, Lord Brahma immediately came to the sons of Barhishman and pacified them with words of logic. The remaining trees, being very much afraid of the Prachetas, immediately delivered their daughter at the advice of Lord Brahma. Following the order of Lord Brahma, all the Prachetas accepted the girl as their wife. From the womb of this girl, the son of Lord Brahma named Daksha took birth. Daksha had to take birth from the womb of Marisha due to his disobeying and disrespecting Lord Mahadev. Consequently, he had to give up his body twice. His previous body had been destroyed, but he, the same Daksha, inspired by the supreme will, created all the desired living entities in the Chakshusha Manvantar. After being born, Daksha, by the super excellence of his bodily luster, covered all other bodily opulence, because he was very expert in performing fruitive activity. He was called by the name Daksha, meaning the very expert. Lord Brahma therefore engaged Daksha in the work of generating living entities and maintaining them. In due course of time, Daksha also engaged other Prajapatis, progenitors, in the process of generation and maintenance. Thus end Chapter 30 of Canto 4, the activities of the Prachetas. Chapter 31. Narada instructs the Prachetas. The great saint Maitreya continued, After that, the Prachetas lived at home for thousands of years and developed perfect knowledge and spiritual consciousness At last they remembered the blessings of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and left home, putting their wife in charge of a perfect son. The Prachetas went to the seashore in the west, where the great liberated sage Jajali was reciting. After perfecting the spiritual knowledge by which one becomes equal toward all living entities, the Prachetas became perfect in Krishna consciousness. After practicing the yogasana for mystic yoga, the Prachetas managed to control their life air, mind, words, and external vision. Thus, by the pranayama process, they were completely relieved of material attachment. By remaining perpendicular, they could concentrate their minds on the uppermost Brahman. While they were practicing this pranayama, the great sage Narada, who is worshipped by both demons and by demigods, came to see them. As soon as the Prachetas saw this great sage Narada had appeared, they immediately got up, even from their asanas. As required, they immediately offered obeisances and worshipped him, and when they saw that Narada Muni was properly seated, they began to ask him questions. All the Prachetas began to address the great sage Narada. O great sage, O Brahmana, we hope you met with no disturbances while coming here. Is it due to our great fortune that we are now able to see you? By the traveling of the sun, people are relieved from the fear of the darkness of night, and fear brought about by thieves and rogues. Similarly, your traveling is like the sun's, for you drive away all kinds of fears. O Master, may we inform you that because of our being overly attached to family affairs, we almost forgot the instructions we received from Lord Shiva and Lord Vishnu? O Master, kindly enlighten us in transcendental knowledge, which may act as a torchlight, by which we may cross the dark nations of material existence. The great sage Maitreya continued, My dear Vidura, being thus petitioned by the Prachetas, the supreme devotee Narada, who is always absorbed in thoughts of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, began to reply. The great sage Narada said, When a living entity is born to engage in the devotional service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the Supreme Controller, his birth, all his activities, his lifespan, his mind, and his words are all factually perfect. A civilized human being has three kinds of birth. The first birth is by a pure father and mother, and this birth is called birth by semen. The next birth takes place when one is initiated by the spiritual master, and this birth is called Savitra. The third birth, called Yagika, takes place when one is given the opportunity to worship Lord Vishnu. Despite the opportunities for attaining such births, even if one gets the lifespan of a demigod, if one does not actually engage in the service of the Lord, everything is useless. Similarly, one's activities may be mundane or spiritual, but they are useless if they are not meant for satisfying the Lord. Without devotional service, what is the meaning of severe austerities? The process of hearing, the power of speech, the power of mental speculation, elevated intelligence, strength, and the power of the senses. Transcendental practice that do not ultimately help one realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead are useless, be they mystic yoga practices, the analytical study of matter, severe austerity, the acceptance of sannyas, or the study of Vedic literature. All these may be very important aspects of spiritual advancement, but unless one understands the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, all these processes are useless. Factually, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the original source of all self-realization. Consequently, the goal of all auspicious activities, karma, jnana, yoga, and bhakti, is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As pouring water on the root of a tree energizes the trunk, branches, twigs, and everything else, as the supplying food to the stomach enlivens the senses and limbs of the body, simply worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead through devotional service automatically satisfies the demigods who are parts of the Supreme Personality. During the rainy season, water is generated from the sun, and in due course of time, during the summer seasons, that the very same water is again absorbed by the sun. Similarly, all living entities, moving and inert, are generated from the earth, and again, after some time, they all return to the earth as dust. Similarly, everything emanates from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and in due course of time, everything enters into Him again. Just as the sunshine is non-different from the sun, the cosmic manifestation is also non-different from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Supreme Personality is therefore all-pervasive within this material creation. When the senses are active, they appear to be part and parcel of the body, but when the body is asleep, their activities are unmanifest. Similarly, the whole cosmic creation appears different and yet non-different from the Supreme Person. My dear kings, sometimes in the sky there are clouds, sometimes there is darkness, and sometimes there is illumination. The appearance of all these take place consecutively. Similarly, in the Supreme Absolute, the modes of passion, darkness, and goodness appear as consecutive energies. Sometimes they appear, and sometimes they disappear. Because the Supreme Lord is the cause of all causes, He is the supersoul of all individual living entities, and He exists as both the remote and the immediate cause. Since He is aloof from the material emanations, He is free from their interactions, and is the Lord of all material nature. You should therefore engage in His devotional service, thinking yourself qualitatively one with Him. By showing mercy to all living entities, being satisfied somehow or other and controlling the senses from sense enjoyment, one can very quickly satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Janardana. Being completely cleansed of all material desires, the devotees are freed from all material contamination. Thus, they can always think of the Lord constantly and address Him very feelingly. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, knowing Himself to be the controller by His devotees, does not leave them for a second, just as the sky overhead never becomes invisible. The Supreme Personality of Godhead becomes very dear to those devotees who have no material possessions, but are fully happy in possessing the devotional service of the Lord. Indeed, the Lord relishes the devotional activities of such devotees. Those who are puffed up with material education, wealth, aristocracy, and fruitive activity are very proud of possessing material things, and they often deride the devotees. Even if such people offer the Lord worship, the Lord never accepts them. Although the Supreme Personality of Godhead is self-sufficient, He becomes dependent on His devotees. He does not care for the Goddess of Fortune, nor for the kings and the demigods who are after the favors of the Goddess of Fortune. Where is the person who is actually grateful and will not worship the Personality of Godhead? The great sage Maitreya continued, My dear King Vidura, Sri Narad Muni, the son of Lord Brahma, thus described all these relationships with the Supreme Personality of Godhead to the Prachetas. Afterward, he returned to Brahmaloka. Hearing from Narada's mouth the glories of the Lord, which vanquish all the ill fortune of the world, the Prachetas also became attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, meditating on His lotus feet. They advanced to the ultimate destination. My dear Vidura, I have told you everything you wanted to know about the conversation between Narada and the Prachetas. The conversation describing the glories of the Lord, I have related this as far as possible. Shukadev Goswami continued, O best of kings, King Parikshit, I have now finished telling about the descendants of the first son of Swayambhuva Manu, Uttanapada. I shall now try to relate the activities of the descendants of Priyavrata, the second son of Swayambhuva Manu. Please hear them attentively. Although Maharaj Priyavrata received instructions from the great sage Narada, he still engaged in ruling the earth. After fully enjoying material possessions, he divided his property among his sons. Then he attained a position by which he could return home back to Godhead. My dear king, in this way, after hearing the transcendental message of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his devotees from the great sage Maitreya, Vidura was overwhelmed with ecstasy. With tears in his eyes, he immediately fell down at the lotus feet of his guru, his spiritual master. He then fixed the Supreme Personality of Godhead within the core of his heart. Sri Vidura said, O great mystic, O greatest of all devotees, by your causeless mercy I have been shown the path of liberation from this world of darkness. By following this path, a person liberated from the material world can return home back to Godhead. Shukadeva Goswami continued, Vidura thus offered obeisances unto the great sage Maitreya, and taking his permission started for the city of Hastinapur to see his own kinsman, although he had no material desires. O king, those who hear these topics about the kings who are completely surrendered to the personality of Godhead obtain without difficulty a lifelong wealth, good reputation, good fortune, and ultimately the opportunity to return home back to Godhead. Thus ends chapter 31. Narada instructs the Prachetas of the fourth canto. Thus end the fourth canto. Canto 5. The creative impetus. Chapter 1. The activities of Maharaj Priyavrata. Chapter 1 of the fifth canto. The activities of Maharaj Priyavrata. King Parikshit inquired from Shukadeva Goswami, O great sage, why did King Priyavrata, who was a great self-realized devotee of the Lord, remain in household life, which is the root cause of bondage of karma, fruitive activity, and which defeats the mission of human life? Devotees are certainly liberated persons. Therefore, O greatest of the Brahmanas, they cannot possibly be absorbed in family affairs. Elevated Mahatmas who have taken Elevated Mahatmas who have taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are fully satiated by the shade of the lotus feet. Their consciousness cannot possibly become attached to family members. The king continued, O great Brahmana, this is my great doubt. How was it possible for a person like King Priyavrata, who was so attached to wife, children, and home, to achieve the topmost infallible perfection in Krishna consciousness? Sri Shukadev Goswami said, what you have said is correct. The glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is praised in eloquent transcendental verses by such exalted personalities as Brahma, are very pleasing to great devotees and liberated persons. One who is attached to the nectarian honey of the Lord's lotus feet, and whose mind is always absorbed in his glories, may sometimes be checked by some impediment, but he still never gives up the exalted position he has acquired. Shukadev Goswami continued, my dear king, Prince Priyavrata was a great devotee because he sought the lotus feet of Narada, his spiritual master, and thus achieved the highest perfection in transcendental knowledge. With advanced knowledge, he always engaged in discussing spiritual subjects and did not divert his attention to anything else. The prince's father then asked him to take charge of ruling the world. He tried to convince Priyavrata that this was his duty and indicated in the revealed scriptures. Prince Priyavrata, however, was continuously practicing bhakti yoga by constantly remembering the Supreme Personality of Godhead, thus engaging in all his seven senses in the service of the Lord. Therefore, although the order of his father could not be rejected, the prince did not welcome it. Thus, he very conscientiously raised the question of whether he might be diverted from devotional service by accepting the responsibility of ruling over the world. Sri Shukadev Goswami continued, the first created being and the most powerful demigod in the universe is Lord Brahma, who is always responsible for developing universal affairs. Born directly from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he dedicates his activities to the welfares of the entire universe, for he knows the purpose of the universal creation. This supremely powerful Lord Brahma, accompanied by his associates and the personified Vedas, left his own abode in the highest planetary system and descended to the place of Prince Priyavrata's meditation. As Lord Brahma descended on his carrier, the great swan, all the residents of the planets named Siddhaloka, Gandharvaloka, Satyaloka, and Chandraloka, as well as great sages and demigods flying in different airplanes, assembled within the canopy of the sky to receive Lord Brahma and worship him. As he received respect and adoration from the residents of various planets, Lord Brahma appeared just like a full moon surrounded by illuminating stars. Lord Brahma's great swan then arrived at the border of Gandhamadana hill and approached Prince Priyavrata, who was sitting there. Lord Brahma, the father of Narada Muni, is the supreme person within this universe. As soon as Narada saw the great swan, he could understand that Brahma had arrived. Therefore, he immediately stood up, along with Swayambhuva Manu and his son Priyavrata, whom Narada was instructing. Then they folded their hands and began to worship Lord Brahma with great respect. My dear King Parikshit, because Lord Brahma had finally descended from Satyaloka to Bhuloka, Narada Muni, Prince Priyavrata, and Priyavrata and Svayambhuvamanu came forward to offer him objects of worship and to praise him in highly qualified language according to Vedic etiquette. At that time, Lord Brahma, the original person of this universe, felt compassion for Priyavrata and looking upon him with a smiling face spoke to him as follows. Lord Brahma, the supreme person within this universe, said, "My dear Priyavrata, kindly hear attentively what I shall say to you. Do not be jealous of the Supreme Lord, who is beyond our experimental measurements. All of us, including Lord Shiva, are your father and great sage Maharishi Narada must carry out the order of the Supreme. We cannot deviate from his order. One cannot avoid the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, not by the strength of 7 austerities, an exalted Vedic education, or the power of mystic yoga, physical prowess, or intellectual activities, nor can one use his power of religion, his material opulence, or any other means, either by himself or with the help of others, to defy the order of the Supreme Lord. That is not possible for any living being, from Brahma down to the ant. My dear Priyavrata, by the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, all living entities accept different types of bodies for birth and death, activity, lamentation, illusion, fear of dangers, and happiness and distress. My dear boy, all of us are bound by the Vedic instructions to divisions of Varna Ashram according to our qualities and work. These divisions are difficult to avoid because they are scientifically arranged. We must therefore carry out our duties of Varna Ashram Dharma like bulls obliged to move according to the direction of a driver pulling on ropes knotted in their noses. My dear Priyavrata, according to our association with the different modes of material nature, the Supreme Personality of Godhead gives us our specific bodies and the happiness and distress we achieve. One must therefore remain situated as he is and be conducted by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, exactly as a blind man is led by a person who has eyes with which to see. Even if one is liberated, he nonetheless accepts the body and has received according to his past karma. Without misconceptions, however, he regards his enjoyment and suffering due to that karma, the way an awkward person regards the dream he had while sleeping. He thus remains steadfast and never works to achieve another material body under the influence of the 3 modes of material nature. Even if he goes from forest to forest, one who is not self-controlled must always fear material bondage because he is living with 6 co-wives. The mind and knowledge acquiring senses, even householder life, however, cannot harm a self-satisfied, learned man who has conquered his senses. One who is situated in household life and who systematically conquers his mind and 5 sense organs is like a king in his fortress who conquers his powerful enemies. After one has been trained in household life and his lusty desires have decreased, he can move anywhere without danger. Lord Brahma continued, My dear Priyavrata, seek shelter inside the opening in the lotus feet of the Lord, whose navel is also like a lotus. Thus conquer the 6 sense organs, the mind and knowledge acquiring senses. Accept material enjoyment because the Lord extraordinarily has ordered you to do this. You will thus always be liberated from material association and be able to carry out the Lord's orders in your constitutional position. Sri Shukadev Goswami continued, After thus fully instructed by Lord Brahma, who is the spiritual master of the 3 worlds, Priyavrata, his own position being inferior, offered obeisances, accepted the order, and carried it out with great respect. Lord Brahma was then worshipped by Manu, who respectfully satisfied him as well as he could. Priyavrata and Narada also looked upon Brahma with no tinges of resentment. Having engaged Priyavrata in accepting his father's request, Lord Brahma returned to his abode, Satyaloka, which is indescribable by the endeavor of the mundane mind or words. Swayambhuva Manu, with the assistance of Lord Brahma, thus fulfilled his desire. With the permission of the great sage Narada, he delivered to his son the governmental responsibility for maintaining and protecting all the planets of the universe. He thus achieved relief from the most dangerous, poisonous ocean of material desires. Following the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Maharaj Priyavrata, fully engaged in worldly affairs, yet he always thought of the lotus feet of the Lord, which are the cause of liberation from all material attachment. Although Priyavrata Maharaj was completely freed from all material contamination, he ruled the material world just to honor the orders of his superiors. Thereafter, Maharaj Priyavrata married Bharishmati, the daughter of the Prajapati named Vishvakarma. In her he begot 10 sons equal to him in beauty, character, magnanimity, and the other qualities. He also begot a daughter, the youngest of all, named Urjasvati. The 10 sons of Maharaj Priyavrata were named Agnidhara, Idmajiva, Yagyabahu, Mahavira, Hiyanyareta, Gritaprishta, Savana, Medatiti, Vitihotra, and Kavi. These are also names of Agni, the fire god. 3 among these 10, namely Kavi, Mahavira, and Savana, lived in complete celibacy. Thus trained in brahmachari life from the beginning of childhood, they are very conversant with the highest perfection, known as Paramahamsa Ashram. Thus situated in the renounced order from the beginning of their lives, all 3 of them completely controlled the activities of the senses and thus became great saints. They concentrated their minds always upon the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the resting place of the totality of living entities and who is therefore celebrated as Vasudeva. Lord Vasudeva is the only shelter of those who are actually afraid of material existence. By constantly thinking of his lotus feet, these 3 sons of Maharaj Priyavrata became advanced in pure devotional service. By the prowess of their devotional service, they could directly perceive the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is situated in everyone's heart as the Supersoul, and realized that there was qualitatively no difference between themselves and him. In his other wife, Maharaj Priyavrata begot 3 sons named Uttama, Tamasa, and Raivata. All of them later took charge of the Manvantar millenniums. After Kavi, Mahavira, and Savana were completely trained in the Paramahamsa stage of life, Maharaj Priyavrata ruled the universe for 11 arbudas of years. Whenever he was determined to fix his arrow upon his bowstring with his 2 powerful arms, all opponents of regulative principles of religious life would flee from his presence in fear of the unparalleled prowess he displayed in ruling the universe. He greatly loved his wife Bharishmati, and with increase of days their exchange of nuptial love also increased. By her feminine behavior, as she dressed herself, walked, got up, smiled, laughed, and glanced about, Queen Bharishmati increased his energy. Thus, although he was a great soul, he appeared lost in the feminine conduct of his wife. He behaved with her just like an ordinary man, but actually he was a great soul. While so excellently ruling the universe, King Priyavrata once became dissatisfied with the circumambulation of the most powerful sun god. Encircling Sumeru hill on his chariot, the sun god illuminates all the surrounding planetary systems. However, when the sun is on the northern side of the hill, the south receives less light, and when the sun is in the south, the north receives less light. King Priyavrata disliked this situation and therefore decided to make daylight in the part of the universe where there was night. He followed the orbit of the sun god on a brilliant chariot and thus fulfilled his desire. He could perform such wonderful activities because of the power he had achieved by worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When Priyavrata drove his chariot behind the sun, the rims of his chariot wheels created impressions that later became 7 oceans, dividing the planetary system known as Bhumandala into 7 islands. The names of these islands are Jambu, Plaksha, Shalmali, Kusha, Kranucha, Shaka, and Pushkara. Each island is twice as large as the one preceding it, and each is surrounded by a liquid substance, beyond which is the next island. The 7 oceans respectively containing salt water, sugarcane juice, liquor, clarified butter, milk, emulsified yogurt, and sweet drinking water. All the islands are completely surrounded by these oceans, and each ocean is equal in breadth to the island it surrounds. Maharaj Priyavrata, the husband of the Queen Bharashmati, gave sovereignty over the 3 islands to his respective sons, namely Agnidhara, Imajiva, Yanyabahu, Hiranyatreta, Krihasprishta, Medhatithi, and Vitihotra. Thus they all became kings by order of their father. King Priyavrata then gave his daughter Urjaswati in marriage to Shukracharya, who begot in her a daughter named Devayani. My dear king, a devotee who has taken shelter of the dust from the lotus feet of the Lord can transcend the influence of the 6 material whips, namely hunger, thirst, limitation, illusion, old age, and death. And he can conquer the mind and 5 senses. However, this is not very wonderful for a pure devotee of the Lord, because even a person beyond the jurisdiction of the 4 castes, in other words, an untouchable, is immediately relieved of bondage to material existence if he utters the holy name of the Lord even once. While enjoying his material opulence with full strength and influence, Maharaj Priyavrata once began to consider that although he had fully surrendered to the great saint Narada and was actually on the path of Krishna consciousness, he had somehow become again entangled in material activities. Thus his mind now became restless, and he began to speak in the spirit of renunciation. The king thus began criticizing himself. Alas, how condemned I have become because of my sense gratification. I have now fallen into material enjoyment, which is exactly like a covered well. I have had enough. I am not going to enjoy any more. Just see how I have become like a dancing monkey in the hand of my wife. Because of this, I am condemned. By the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Maharaj Priyavrata reawakened to his senses. He divided all his earthly possessions among his obedient sons. He gave up everything, including his wife, with whom he had enjoyed so much sense gratification, and his great and opulent kingdom, and he completely renounced all attachment. His heart, having been cleansed, became a place of the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus he was able to return to the path of Krishna consciousness, spiritual life, and resume the position he had attained by the grace of the great saint Narada. There are many famous verses regarding Maharaj Priyavrata's activities. No one but the Supreme Personality of Godhead could do what Maharaj Priyavrata has done. Maharaj Priyavrata dissipated the darkness of night, and with the rims of his great chariot he excavated 7 oceans. To stop the quarreling among different peoples, Maharaj Priyavrata marked boundaries at the rivers at the edges of mountains and forests, so that no one would trespass upon another's property. As the great follower and devotee of the sage Narada, Maharaj Priyavrata considered hellish the opulence he had achieved by dint of fruitive activities and mystic power, whether in the lower or heavenly planetary systems or in human society. Thus end the activities of Maharaj Priyavrata. Chapter 1, Canto 5.
Спасибо всем, кто участвует.
Thank you everyone who's taking part in this wonderful process of self-realization and charity.
Сейчас у нас будет встреча через
We're going to have a meeting in about 10 minutes.
Наверняка у кого-то уже накопилось.
Maybe some people have have some questions now.
Посмотрим, кто
We'll see who
будет участвовать у нас сегодня.
will take part
Я в любом
today.
случае буду.
I'm going to be there, and whatever the case.
Будет участвовать матушка Мандакини.
And Mother Mandakini.
И мы продолжим наше общение.
And we will continue our conversation and our discussions on these topics.
Также у нас сегодня вечером будет чтение.
And we also have a reading this evening.
Нам есть чем заняться.
In other words, we have something to do. We have something to please God and to also please people who are also in need of help and spiritual knowledge. But you can see how it acts. Can't say it doesn't act secretly. But if we believe in God and that is located in the hearts of the heart of every living being, we can understand our real desires that consist of we give the fruits of our activities to the Lord, and we do it without motive. And hopefully the Lord, and let the Lord be kind to all the living entities. Thank you very much, and see you soon.